Okay, so we're live. Um, let's see, make sure everything's working. It appears so. It feels like it's been a little while since we've streamed, but I'm happy to be back. I don't think it's been any longer than normal, but last month was weird for me with the wedding and all. So um, I did stream last night live on Instagram and took some live calls and let people into the video chat. That was actually awesome. It's probably the third or fourth time I've done that now, and I was so hesitant to do it for so long. And everybody has been great. So if you want to join me for a live video discussion, Monday nights, on Instagram are going to become more and more a regular thing. But today I want to talk about so many things. I don't even really know exactly where to start, but we're going to talk about probably the same things today as we do tomorrow, just different to different depths and different degrees. But usually Tuesdays are kind of a working session, and I tell you guys what I'm working on. I'll work on something on the stream, and then Wednesdays are more organized. But this will be probably pretty organized. I don't really know. We'll see. But I want to talk about Eric Weinstein and Tim Nguyen, I think is how you pronounce his name. I do apologize if I mispronounced his name again. I know I mispronounced it on the last stream. But I've been keeping up with this like drama that has been unfolding with Tim, and you know I want to talk about the proper way of giving criticism, because and how do you really you know dismiss or disprove a theory of everything? Because Tim is making quite a bit of claims about him disproving the entirety of geometric unity and rendering it, a useless and embarrassment of a piece of work. And I think that that is just nonsense. I think geometric unity and sentient singularity theory have a lot in common. They're not the same. I don't want to make claims that I don't know, others wouldn't agree with necessarily, but I will make the claims that I think are true. And I think it's definitely true that sentient singularity theory and geometric unity have a lot in common. Um, but like I've said, a lot of these have a lot in common, but there's also some differences between the two. But the structure that I've mapped seems to be the same structure that geometric unity is trying to describe. So the cosmological verse, the four primary perspectives, the the fundamental perspectives that are with the six fundamental perspectives in the binary triality, which I think is the Calabi-Yau manifold. Like that structure is also part of geometric unity. It appears to be, and so in a way, my defense of geometric unity today is a bit of also a defense of sentient singularity theory. And if you don't know who Tim is in this like drama, and I'm not going to try and get into gossip too much. I don't like lobbing insults at people and giving character attacks. Everybody has ulterior motives. Everybody has an agenda of personal gain, and that's fine as long as it's not at the expense of the whole. And we're going to talk about what destroys the goal of science more so than we are going to discuss, who said, what, and whether or not, so and so has bad intentions. This has been, quite a bit of a trend by both Eric, I will say, and Tim in this like confrontation, is they both have kind of like just said words that are weapons at each other, and like I don't think that that's right, but they're human and so am I, and I do that sometimes too, so I'm not like judging, but I'm gonna try and avoid that, even though I do have obviously my own opinions. But so Eric Weinstein released his theory of geometric unity, which is a grand unified theory, essentially, that is, or a little toe, which is a little theory of everything. Essentially, I think that's what I would call it. He might not, but the line between a big theory of everything and a little theory of everything, which a little theory of everything unites quantum mechanics and general relativity in the context and language and structures of physics, and then supposedly, I think that this is all actually like not the way of going about it, but whatever. And that a big theory of everything, a big toe, as Tom Campbell puts it, is a theory that describes literally everything and is applicable to everything. It's not just physics as we know it, it's also consciousness and matter and, all these various things that we know to be true. And so Tim released a paper criticizing geometric unity with a anonymous co-author named Theo, that was going by the name of Theopolia, I think. It doesn't really matter because it's not his real name. And there is a debate going on of whether or not criticism should be anonymous. And like, this is one of the things that I want to talk about a little bit in regards to how science should be done. And I recognize that there are mathematicians, engineers, Satoshi Nakamoto, or whatever the guy was that supposedly, invented Bitcoin, who's anonymous. I get it. There are people who have been anonymous in the past and made incredible contributions anonymously. But you have to, if you're going to do something anonymously, the context in which you do something anonymously, I think, where it would be appropriate, is if you're building something, you're engineering something. It's your, cryptocurrency. It's your, blockchain system. I don't know, whatever it is. If you're engineering something that kind of speak for itself and doesn't get debated, it doesn't need to be debated in order for it to be utilized. That is the type of structure that you can do anonymously. But if you're going to lob criticism of someone else's work, it is not right to do it anonymously. It's not a fair fight. When you are criticizing somebody else's work, it's not really supposed to be a fight, but it always ends up being a fight. So if it's going to end up being a fight, it should be a fair fight. And that means that you have to put your reputation on the line. And people told me, oh, well, his pseudonym's reputation of Theopolia is on the line. What the? How does that even make sense? He can change that name, and it just is not. That's such a nonsense argument. You can abandon any, I guess, event that takes place that would be linked to you going forward. You can abandon it by changing your pseudonym or your anonymous name. That's not the same as having it linked to your real name. And you can't make the argument that it is the same as being linked to your real name if you're not willing to use your real name, because obviously there's a reason why you don't want to use your real name, otherwise you'd use it. So it's not the same. And it's being argued that it is the same. It's not, by a few people, at least, or a number of people. And this, debate has kind of like gone on to include Luis Razzo, who I've interviewed on here, who I really like, and he's always welcome back. I really think he's onto something with his theory, so this isn't like about him. I do disagree with him very much on this, and the disagreement that we have is whether or not Tim is an expert, and on that would be, a good investment of the 10 hours it takes to engage with and plan a conversation, and also the, you know, the fallout from that conversation being public. So and this is not a criticism of Tim in personally. This is just a criticism of, it is a critique of, I think, the idea that you are an expert who is worthy of being engaged with on this subject of a theory of everything, just because you have a degree in physics or math, or you're very good at physics and math and you have degrees in it and you work for Google AI. It doesn't matter. I'm not here to question Tim's intelligence or Eric's intelligence. We're dealing with very intelligent people, and who are also just people and wrong. But the point is that if you're going to criticize the theory of everything, and I got into this with Tim a little bit on Twitter, and he thought I was insane for saying this, but is that I said you have to believe in an alternative hypothesis, an alternative theory to the one that you're criticizing. If you're saying that one is wrong, geometric unity is wrong, then you have to believe in string theory or Tim's theory or emergence theory or the CTMU or whatever it is, Sentient Singularity Theory. You have to believe in something in order to not believe in something else. And if you try and disbelieve in something without having it be an emergent perspective to have on something, then you are subscribing to a negative ideology, or an anti-ideology, as I call it. And an anti-ideology is cognitively and mentally trapping and it's dangerous to your thought process. You always end up becoming exactly what you are opposed to. And the reason why is because you can't actually define yourself by something that is non-existent, okay? So if you're going to try and define your perspective as that's wrong, but it's not an emergent perspective due to you believing that something else is right. What happens is that instead of defining yourself by that thing that you believe is right, that is different from that thing that you emergently believe is wrong, you believe that something is supposedly wrong, but really you just believe in that thing. And that sounds crazy, but it's not when you really examine how our mind works. Any point that you focus on becomes your focus. So this is why anti-fascists become fascist. This is why anti-racists become racists. This is why anyone who claims to be anti-something ends up becoming that thing. And so if you are claiming that something is wrong, and it's not an emergent perspective that you have due to believing that something else is right, that is not that is mutually exclusive of whatever it is that you're emergently disbelieve in, then what happens is that you end up being defined by nothing. And whatever your focus is, whether it's beating someone in an argument, whether it is opposing fascism or racism or geometric unity, you will end up believing in something that is linked to that. So you might end up becoming racist or fascist, but when it comes to science, you're not going to become a geometric unity, but you will end up latching on mentally to something else that's not constructive. It's going to be destructive perspective because it's an anti-ideology. It is a destructive ideology intrinsically. And this is why I don't like skeptics. And the idea of scientific skepticism is a stupid idea. It's not just a stupid idea. It's not just an incorrect idea. it's a non-idea, okay? It's not defined by anything that is belief. So if you're a skeptic, and that's how you approach the UFO phenomenon, then you're just anti-UFO, which is stupid. Like, you should be pro something, not anti something. Let your disagreements be emergent from your beliefs. That's a great quote. I'm writing that down, sorry. Let your disagreements be emergent from your beliefs. That's so important, and it applies very, very much to scientific criticism. If you are just someone criticizing somebody else's work and saying, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, and you don't have anything that you believe in or that you have created that is an alternative, then you just will fall victim to your own mind, and you will trap yourself into a social situation where you basically have defined yourself by as a destroyer. Okay? And science, if it's constructive science, if it's constructive criticism, if it's constructive feedback, it by definition must be constructive. And you cannot be constructive if you define yourself as a destroyer. And you define yourself as a destroyer if you subscribe to an anti-ideology or you have an anti-perspective going into something. So like if you disbelieve, this is why atheism doesn't exist, okay? It's anti-theist. And the reason why is because you can't just not believe. You have to believe in something. This is how the mind works. You can't say, well, I don't believe in God. I have a lack of belief in God. Sam Harris says this, and he's just oblivious to how his mind has trapped him in this topic. He'll say, you know, I'm an atheist. An atheist has a lack of belief, a no belief in God. It's not that you don't believe in God or you believe that God doesn't exist. It's that you have a lack of belief that doesn't exist. You only have belief. You only have belief. This is why people will say, someone that doesn't believe in anything will believe everything. Or, you know, someone that believes in nothing will believe in anything. Something like that. You know, it changes. But that is due to this same phenomenon where your mind requires something to latch onto. It is mentally inevitable. There's no way to work around it. The only way that you can have a lack of belief, like me in QAnon, I have no belief in QAnon. I don't engage with it. Okay? If I were to engage with the subject, I would intrinsically form a belief, and that belief would come out some way or another. And if I denied that belief, then I would be in denial of reality, which is not good. But I don't engage with the subject at all. I don't research it. I know nothing about it. I know some people that I know are really into it, and some people I know think it's nonsense, and I just don't engage. And that's fine. But if you're going to make a statement about something, then that you know is descriptive, then you have to have a belief in it in some way, shape, or form. So I really am starting to think about the way in which criticism should be lobbed, because I've noticed this in criticisms of sentient singularity theory and my own little theories within sentient singularity theory regarding especially bot periodicity. I've talked to you guys before. I believe bot periodicity is basically what I call the stages of sentience, and it's loops of consciousness within other loops of consciousness. And so I spoke to a PhD mathematician about this, and they told me that I knew nothing, and I was like, okay, well, if it's not what I think it is, then what is it? And they were lost. They had never been asked that question, and people listening were like, okay, you know what? It's actually apparent that, Tyler, you might be wrong about what you believe it is, but it's also clear that so-and-so he doesn't actually know what it is. And that mathematician's statement to me was, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's not that. It's not what you think it is. But it's not something that I can define. It's just not what you think it is. This is having the perspective of a destroyer. It is an anti-ideology. It's less than useless. It's destructive. It's counterproductive, which is destructive. And I think that, I think that Tim's paper on geometric unity is that. And it's not a critique of Tim's character. Like I said, I have my own opinions, and everybody fails, and everybody also has redeeming qualities. I'm not going to lie about that, and I don't know Tim very well, but I will say we don't see eye to eye at all. We have very different focuses, but that has nothing to do with this paper. This paper is purely debunking geometric unity and not proposing an alternative. And this is an anti-ideology. It is a destructive effort by Tim and this anonymous person. And I totally understand why somebody wouldn't want to engage with somebody who has destructive intentions. And that is destructive intentions. It doesn't mean that he has malicious intentions. And I would argue that destructive intentions are very similar to malicious intentions, but they're not consciously malicious intentions. We all have destructive intentions sometimes. So, like I said, again, it's not a judgment. But it's important to understand why they are, I guess you could say malicious, but they're not really malicious. They're just destructive. And destructive intentions are not good intentions. Good intentions are generative intentions. They grow. Goodness, understanding, life, prosperity, whatever, peace. But to grow contention is by releasing an anti-paper is wrong. So it's literally objectively wrong. So if you were, I think his name is Lee, I need to look, someone who focuses on loop quantum gravity, and that's your theory, or string theory like Michio Kaku, or E8, the exceptionally simple theory of everything by Garrett Lisi, Eric's, quote unquote, arch nemesis. If you disbelieve in geometric unity, because you believe in Garrett's exceptionally simple theory of everything, that is constructed around E8, that is fine. If you believe that a certain theory is wrong in physics because if you believe that materialism and the idea that consciousness comes from unconsciousness, which is a current physics, narrative, if you believe that is wrong because you believe in sentient singularity theory, that's fine. But if you just disbelieve that, in that idea, that's not correct either, or disbelieve in the idea of theism, that's not correct either. You will end up like Sam Harris, who is just like a chicken with his head cut off. And I say that completely honestly, and not judgmentally either, but you will end up being a chicken with its head cut off if you subscribe to an anti-ideology. I used to have this quote on my Twitter, and it said, if you chase a chicken with its head cut off, you are a chicken with its head cut off. And if you are subscribing to an anti-ideology, or you are defining yourself by non-existence, okay? So basically you're saying, my perspective is defined by that not being true, aka it's not existing. Because if something is true, then it exists. So if something isn't true and you're defining a perspective by that, then you are defining your perspective by something that doesn't exist, by non-existence. That means your focus is on non-existence. Literally, your focus is on non-existence. This will make you a chicken with its head cut off. And there's no way around it. You have to believe in something. And I asked this of Tim. I was like, if I said this, I was like, unless you believe in another theory, whether you came up with it or someone else came up with it, if you believe in an alternative, theory of everything that is not geometric unity, that is fine. That actually would help this conversation be constructive. But it's not constructive. It's just destructive. And his work is just destructive because it's just focused on something that doesn't exist. And he would argue, and others would argue, no, it's focused on GU. But you think GU doesn't exist. So you're focusing on something that you think is non-existence or not true. You have to believe in something as true that is mutually exclusive of a perspective that is emergently then false. You cannot let disbelief lead. It has to follow belief. If disbelief leads, then belief cannot follow. If you don't believe, if I ask you, you're like, what do you think about geometric unity? Well, I don't believe in it. Okay, well, why? Because I don't. Okay, well, what do you believe in? That geometric unity is wrong. Okay, what just happened is that there's no belief that generated, okay? It's just disbelief. And that's because belief cannot follow disbelief. Only disbelief can follow belief. So if you say, what are your thoughts on geometric unity? Well, I think it's wrong. Why? Because I believe in Sentient Singularity Theory. Okay. Fair enough. Like now, what's happened is your disbelief in geometric unity, which they're so close that in the structure that they describe, but some of the implications are a little different. I don't agree with Eric that in proto space-time there's something almost sentient but not quite sentient. I think it's totally sentient. And I understand why he would think that it's not quite sentient, and it makes sense, but I think he's missing a unique quality that he has to factor in. But that difference, if you would sway you on one versus the other. So this, and there's so much more to sentient singularity theory's implications, broad scale, than geometric unity, even though geometric unity has broad implications. I mean, when Eric talks about taste buds and things like that, this and meaning and the binary definitions of meaning, approximate and ultimate meaning, all of this stuff is basically the structures of GU applied, which it's just the structures of existence objectively, of objective existence applied across fields. So you can do that, and but I mean, it can go way further than just physics and biology or chemistry or anything like that. But this is like a concept that I don't really know if it's possible to teach someone about, regarding, you can't be anti. And I've tried having discussions with people about it, and I don't seem to get anywhere unless they already understand this concept. But you can't be anti. You have to be pro something, or you will be a chicken with its head cut off, and you won't realize it, because a chicken with its head cut off is lost. It doesn't know where it's going. It doesn't know, if it has a, how much longer it's going to live. Like, it knows nothing. It doesn't know if it even has a head, because it doesn't have a head to perceive whether or not it has a head. So, like, you're just screwed. And if you subscribe to an anti-ideology like atheism, that's an anti-ideology. I don't think it's possible to be agnostic. It's something that's too intrinsic to to everyone's everyday experience that you're either an anti-theist or a theist, and you can't be an atheist or an agnostic. Like you could be agnostic to QAnon because you don't have to choose to, engage with it. You do have to engage with existence, and so there is no avoiding whether or not you think that it is a sentient being or not. So you can't be agnostic about God. And, people can come at me with all they want with that, but I would definitely be willing to discuss that with anyone, because I think that they're wrong. But debates are stupid. But it's the reason why debates are stupid is because they frame everything as not that guy. Okay, you winning means he loses. Okay, so that's not objectively true in reality. The theory of growth, the theory of everything is a theory of growth. It is a theory that is not, conservation of energy or entropy or your win is their loss. This is why debates are stupid. They're just as stupid as an anti-ideology. They are. They're not constructive. And we don't know how to think anymore. Our education system has destroyed our ability to think because it's removed the time and the activity that we would have otherwise gained wisdom from and then learned how to, think on our own. When you sit in a classroom all day long for 8 hours a day, every single day, for 5 days a week, for what? A minimum of 12 years of your life? Do you know how much time you have of figuring shit out that you have lost? That is the only way, by the way, to learn how to think is to figure it out on your own. I can describe and show you this structure of the decision tree of thinking. But the reality is that you have to go and try and figure this out, or else it doesn't matter. And even if you just memorized it and followed it, it still probably wouldn't help you learn how to think, because you have to know why these structures occur in order to know how to think. Because what happens when you're thrown off a little bit or you forget the recipe? It's like there is no recipe that you can forget if you understand it. And so it's very important to learn how to think, but you can't be taught how to think. And I had this discussion with Will Roosh, who is a high school teacher, and he's a great teacher. I'm not a fan of teachers and academia and our education system at all, but he is, if every teacher was like him, it would be a much more constructive environment. But even then, I do have a disagreement with him. I don't think that you can really teach people how to think. And I will say this, actually. He did say that the way in which he would go about teaching kids how to think is just by playing devil's advocate all the time. And basically, you're just challenging them. And that is actually teaching them how to think. Is you have to encounter challenge. And challenge doesn't mean can I memorize all of this information for the test? It means, can I figure out a way to maneuver and achieve my goals in a specific situation? Okay, so if somebody's challenging you, then you have to figure out a way around that challenge and to beat that challenge. That is actually the only way in which you would be able to help kids learn how to think. It's not that you're teaching them. because you're just helping them learn. You're not like, here's how think. You're just like, challenge. And that is objectively how you learn how to think. So, but we remove that from the environment. Everything is safe, now intellectually, and I'm not talking about topics. I'm talking about like, you can't do woodshop anymore and do activities that are linked to the real world. I've talked about it before. You can't do the ropes course at my high school anymore because somebody fell and broke their back. And it was, the best course at the school. It taught me more than any other course. And about overcoming challenge. And so, like that, those very important lessons that are only learned in moments of challenge are no longer going to occur when you've removed all challenge. So we're not teaching people how to think anymore. And this is the problem with people who went to Ivy League schools and maybe now work at Google and get hired by these tech companies, is that they think they've been told their entire life that they're so smart. And Tim, very intelligent. I'm just using it as an example. I was very similar in that I was, intelligent, like in a lot of topics, but also kind of like stupid, or like people will be offended by the word retarded, but I was a little bit retarded in some topics. But I don't think that that word doesn't mean mentally handicapped, like the way that we think of it these days. It means like not working, like you don't function well, I guess. So in a specific thing, so it should be applied to things, not people. The problem isn't that word. The problem is in its application to people in general, not just like, a situation. So, but people who the reason why Silicon Valley is so different today than it was when it was founded is because the people that founded it all dropped out of Ivy League schools, and the people that run it now all did great in Ivy League schools. And so this is what I mean by it. It's a different type of person now, or it's a person that has a different perspective than originally, where you could figure out how to overcome challenge. Now it's not about figuring out how to overcome challenge. It's about via growth, by the way. It's about just like being opposed. How many people do you hear today saying, this is my belief and it defines my perspective, versus like everybody in politics and the social sciences and everything is like, I'm anti this and anti that, and I'm against this, I'm against that. Nobody's pro anything. If they're pro anything, it's that it's kind of this halfway perceived emergent structure from a disbelief, which isn't really, you're not actually pro something, you just kind of like look at in the moment. So this is like people who are who would be like if you are anti that's a good example. This is what I was talking about before, where like disbelief can't lead belief. And so if you're anti some subject or some, topic, I don't know, anti-gun, okay? If you're anti-gun, people who are anti-gun are not nearly as politically engaged as people who are pro, like, Second Amendment. And the reason for that is because you're not pro-peace because you're anti-gun. It's not a truly emergent perspective that emerges from being anti-gun. But to be pro Second Amendment does, or pro self-defense, or pro weapons rights, whatever it is, that perspective is leading, and it is it gives you a perspective of growth. So that's why people are able to sustain that energy when it comes to just like, I'm voting on this issue. I'm a one issue voter on this issue. And like, I'm voting on this issue, and it is going to define my vote, pretty much every single vote. And I'm going to, vote every opportunity that I can vote because of this issue. Nobody does that because you're anti-gun or a pro-gun control, they'll say, but you're not really pro-gun control because that's not a thing. It's just you're anti-gun. So it's like you can't be pro-fascist control. It's like you're just anti-fascist. But it will make you fascist. And being anti-gun makes you kind of pro-gun because you end up being like wanting the cops to go and, enforce all these rules that you put on everybody at the point of a gun. And so this is what I mean by you will end up being exactly what you are against if you define yourself by your perspective by being anti or against something. If you don't have an alternative to geometric unity, should probably shut up about it, other than just like, here, I think I noticed a math error in your work, and here you go, here's this math error, that's it, have a nice life. I don't need to come on your podcast and go on everybody else's podcast and discuss you endlessly or discuss geometric unity endlessly because I just corrected a math equation. That's about the extent of interaction with a theory you should have if you don't have an alternative that's positive. Okay? And I've also discussed before that anybody that's not really working on a theory of everything, there's just no way almost that they can know what is required of that type of work. Because the constraints and freedoms of it are so different than any other, than exploring any other subject. And it's also extreme, it's like hyper constrained in a way that nothing else is that we know in science. And the constraints are counterintuitive to the way that every other subject and field works. So you can't just use what you know from other subjects on it. And I don't think that you can actually be a worthy, like, somebody who's really able to debate the aspects and the parameters of a theory of everything unless you have one. Or you're working on one. Now you can discuss one. Kurt Scheimungle from Theories of Everything does it all the time. Lex Friedman does it all the time. Lots of people do it all the time. Right now, Brian Keating does it all the time. But discussing it and being able to actually like challenge certain things that aren't just like, hey, this equation, this no-go theorem, it's like to challenge the logic the emergent logic that inevitably leads to a specific structure. You have to understand the rules of the creating a piece of work like that, and you just can't know that unless you do it. So I said this to Tim. He didn't agree with me. He was like, you don't have to be a bird to, or have feathers to know what a bird is. This is a different type of experience than that. That's not a good metaphor for the issue that you face when you're just critiquing a theory of everything from the outside. You can't know what a theory of everything is unless you're building one. You really can't. Like, this is why nobody seems to know what it is because the only people that know what it is, or possibly know what it is, are people who are working on it, and that's like 20 people in the world. And you can go by their definition, but like, my definition is probably the most succinct that I've heard, which is that right here. A theory of everything is a recognizable, predictable, and describable pattern that occurs in all instances of objective observation and an explanation for such pattern. You don't know what objective observation is unless you're working on a theory of everything. Like, you can kind of start to intuit if you study and you really work on it, but you have to work on it. If you're not working on it, I can't just tell you what objective observation is and have you truly understand it. But if you were working on this, or you follow this work closely, on a daily or weekly basis, and you discuss with me, and you're in our Discord chats, and you're on here in this, the chat, then you can actually like start to get the hang of this. But you have to study it, and you have to throw out any preconceived notions of what the requirements and constraints of that structure would be, because you don't know until you do it. I agree with you definitely with that. Maybe it's not that unconventional for an academic. Outside of the other obvious problems with peer review is often done in anonymity to relieve from pressures of conflicts of interest, etc. It doesn't actually accomplish that. It just like hides it. Not saying it's right, but what...
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Oh my gosh, Siri is always listening. It's really like concerning, actually. I really don't like it. This is why we need hard switches on all of our wireless devices, and it's like a moral imperative. But not saying it's right, but what the person may be used to, or their spineless jerk, one or the other. I don't want to call anybody a spineless jerk, but some people have definitely acted like spineless jerks in this situation, but in different moments. But I don't want to call anybody objectively a spineless jerk, but people have been spineless jerks in this. And I will say this: if you're critiquing someone else's work and they have worked on it for 30 years or 20 years or 1 year, it doesn't matter, and they're sticking it out into the ether for all to see, and it's something as crazy as a theory of everything, and they're putting their name behind it, and you're just criticizing anonymously, that is being a spineless jerk. Like, if you don't have the spine to put your reputation on the line when you engage with a topic, don't. This is a big problem with men these days online. Most men have these like anonymous accounts because they want to talk about things that society will dox them for, because society is increasingly feminine, and it's not it doesn't allow for statements that could in any way be conceived of as offensive, which is unfortunate right now. But there are ways that we might be able to help that situation a bit in certain circumstances. But the best way to handle that is to go into a community that is engaging organically with a certain subject, and discuss that subject there, instead of in front of other people who are not engaged with it organically, because they don't know, and then they'll just judge it. They'll judge what you say, and not and how it sounds to them, not actually like its implications, its relevant implications. Pure skeptics make me laugh. They are religious as the people they tend to close out. They are more religious. They are more destructively religious than people who are, dogmatically Catholic or something like that. If you are an atheist and you are, if you are somebody who your atheism is a leading perspective in your life or a leading focus, or an area of heavy focus for you, like Sam Harris or something, you are more religious than the people that you despise. And this is what I mean. It's an anti-ideology. You become exactly what you oppose. Sam Harris is more religious than any Catholic on earth, because those Catholics at least believe in something, even if it's right or wrong, or it doesn't matter. They believe in something, and their disbelief in something else is due to their belief in that. Whereas Sam Harris, he doesn't believe in anything. He believes in not believing, which doesn't make any sense. And sorry, there's like a gecko freaking out over there or something. I can't really tell what's happening. I think it caught a bug, but like, you have to believe in something. It's so essential, and if you don't have a belief on a certain topic, stay out of the topic. Just stay out of it. Tim should stay out of the theory of everything until and the discussions regarding it, until he has one that he believes in himself. And it doesn't matter if he created it or if he studies it, but it was somebody else's creation. He has to believe in one and let his disagreement with geometric unity be emergent, not defining. That's so stupid. And I understand why it's hard to see that, the stupidity of it, but it is stupid. It's just wrong. It's like when they say there's no bad questions. There are bad questions. Bad questions is like, do we have free will, or is the universe deterministic? Like I've talked about before, determinism and free will are two dependent aspects of each other. They are two sides of one coin. When you actually understand existence, that makes it a bad question, because there is no answer that the question leads. You'd have to abandon the structure of the question as an either or, and then basically take up the position that is, a superposition. Be like, well, it's both. But that doesn't answer the original question, because the original question doesn't have an answer that's true. So, there's lots of bad questions, and we don't know what a bad question even is, because the people who are teaching you that there's no bad questions don't actually question anything. Because if they did more often, they would understand that some questions have no answer, and those questions are bad questions. So this is one of the reasons why I actually think that uniting quantum mechanics and general relativity is, it's not impossible, but it has to be done differently under different assumptions and contexts than we are currently thinking, because we're currently thinking that quantum mechanics and relativity are two sides of one field, and they're not. They're two sides of the perspective of being in existence, but it's not. They're not the same field. Like, they're totally different fields. One of them is the constraints of mind, which is quantum mechanics, and the interaction of mind with mind, and then the other is the perspective observed and perceived when you are perceiving something that's not recognized as mind. So like a house is bigger than another house, but you don't say that human is more human. Like, that person is happy and that person is happy. That's what you say. You don't say like that person's way happier than that person. It's like, You only say that if one of them is not happy. You don't say, like, they're both happy, but that one's way happier. No, if you're both happy, then you're both happy. When people say, well, that person's just a way happier person, that doesn't make sense. Happiness is like a moment. It's not like a person. But if you contextualize it properly and you're like, well, I was happy in that moment and way happier than that person over there in that moment that was also happy. Doesn't make sense. So quantum mechanics is that kind of thing. We just don't realize it. And there is no like relativity of it because you're dealing with consciousness and mind and, an electron is a point on a wave. It's not like matter. It doesn't exist like as a particle. It's just the constraint of mind that causes you to see a point. Like it literally is about mind. Whereas that's not really like how we interact with things in relativity. It's about maneuvering an inanimate a perceived inanimate environment is relativity versus an animate environment, which is quantum mechanics. That's what it is. So quantum mechanics, your environment is that you're dealing with it's animate, it's consciousness, it's mind. But whether that's your own mind or the mind of another, and it depends on what part of the standard model you're looking at in regards to that. But relativity is when you are engaging with your environment, the part of your environment that you perceive as inanimate, even though it is animate, but the way in which you maneuver it is not taking into account it as an animate being, as a sentient being. You're just taking it into account as an inanimate structure, and that's fine. But it's even though there is no objectively existent inanimate non-sentient structures, but there is the perception there's the subjective perception of inanimate structures in relativity. But yeah, so good luck unifying those two in as if it's just a simple math equation. I mean, there are equations that are relevant to that, but it's not. You're dealing with almost like a context that is beyond calculation when you're dealing with some things in quantum mechanics. Even though I know there's spin and charge and mass, I get it. But but some of the things that we perceive like mass and things like that in quantum mechanics, that's partially due to our minds observing it from the perspective of relativity, but it's not really like a relativistic structure. So it's, whether or not things have mass. This is why when people are like, do photons have mass? And it's, something people talk about. And the reason why is because it depends on how you look at it. But how do you feel about the Enneagram psychology? Is that like, I think that the Enneagram is correct, actually. Let me see. And when I say correct, I mean like, okay, not the Enneagram is not the one I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs definitely follows the patterns in my work, but so does the Enneagram. The fact that it's 9. Whereas the Myers-Briggs I think is 12, and the way that it's broken down is very much like relevant. I mean, I bet you the Enneagram is correct. It in a lot of ways. It seems to utilize like what people call vortex mathematics, which is not something that I get too into, but I know what it is, and I get that it's real, but I just don't view it as like very applicable in the form that it's usually put in. So I tend not to like look too much into it. But yeah, the Enneagram is this. This looks correct to some degree in that it's not a quantity of 9. So when you look at things like this structure, and you like highlight here, it's a sum of 9, and you highlight here, and it's a sum of 9 right there. And over here too, in the non-calculative model, it's a sum of 9, but here it's 189. And then over here it's 189 as well. But in the non-calculative model, it's at the bottom and on the side. Then it's also 432. So, which is 432. But I didn't try and do that. That's just how it worked. But when you look at the quantum of consciousness, it's a 9-dimensional event structure, and that's basically an Enneagram. But if you look at things like vortex map, there's your Enneagram. And this 369, that's also found in my work as well, right here. 369. So this structure is how I built basically what I think is being made by vortex mathematics, and which is a self-referencing structure, event structure. Like it's an event that's aware of itself. And you can see that it kind of like, it's this structure that, through symmetry and reflectivity, bounces back onto itself and kind of like self-reflects. So here's, one chevron. Here's a double chevron that's opposed. It's like, that's not the only thing here, but the structure is also important, not just the values. It is it's reflecting itself. One's pointing up, one's pointing down, one's 2, one's 1. It's self-reflecting. And I think that it is basically like the same thing as this. But, this is a reflective structure as well. So like this and this have to be symmetrical, so they have to be the same. So whatever you do to this side, you have to do to this side, and that's how you do the structure. And then it kind of like goes within itself. But it's that's why 4 is calculated within as the end point, because it comes from the 4 primary perspectives. So the 4 primary perspectives are within quantum of consciousness, and then quantum of consciousness is also calculating itself via 33, which is 3 by 3, which is, this is also 3 by 3. And I know people will be like, that's numerology. That's a stupid argument. Like, that doesn't mean anything. I don't even know what that means. Like, I didn't look up a numerological websites. Like, I'm just looking that a 3 by 3 grid results in a 3 by 3 number. And I call it an extra arithmetic symmetry. If you're going to deal in the theory of everything, be prepared to start seeing symmetries beyond what you would normally attribute as normal. Like, it's extra arithmetic. It's not due to arithmetic anymore. It's due to symmetry that is transcendent past arithmetic. I'm an agnostic unless we're really open to redefining God to be something possible and meaningful. God is possible and meaningful. Well, God, if existence is a single sentient self-aware being, then that's God. And that is the only definition of God that can be God. That is the definition. If existence, the totality of existence itself, is self-aware of itself, then there's a God. That's it. Like, you don't have to like look to the Bible or anything like that, even though I do. But like that, you don't have to. I'd happily discuss agnosticism in cogent idea on theist questions. I disagree. Ideology is a trash can. Well, you're looking at this. Well, I don't know if you're still here, but if you come back to this, or if you're watching, like you're saying ideology is a trash can. So basically, like you're thinking that to be a theist means to be religious, and that's not the case. I hate the word religion. There are theological traditions, and that's what we should call them, not religion. Religion was a word created by somebody who didn't believe in God to describe a structure they didn't understand. It's like science. It's like, well, that's science, but that's not science. What the F is science and not science? Like if I roll, a basketball across the floor because I want to see how far it's going to go, is that science? It's experimentation. If I think it's going to go halfway across the room, but it only goes a third of the way across the room, is that science? Of course, it's science. People who get into, oh, that's not science, they're basically being dogmatic, like, oh, that's not scripture. That's not dogma. It's not accepted dogma. Religion and science are stupid terms. There's just truth and the pursuit of it, and there's various ways in which we pursue it. And there are theological traditions, and there is experimentation, and there's logical deduction or first principles, reasoning. There's math. There isn't, or there's arithmetic, I guess you could say, like, there isn't science and not science, or religion and not religion. That is a stupid idea. And it's not anybody's fault but, somebody in the past that didn't really understand what they thought they did, and they made a word that had no meaning. That's like a bad word is a word with no meaning that's useful. So like esoteric. So the word esoteric is a useless word. Means like obscure to the point of unreconcilable and abstract to the point of uselessness. It's like there's nothing that objectively exists that meets that description. It might seem like that to you, but that's not true. This is kind of the Aikido sword of no sword deal. The idea is a kind of metaphor. The pro-gun people are anti-gun in the sense that they are against violence and use guns to prevent gun violence. Yeah, exactly. When we look at what happens, it's not paradoxical. It sounds that way. Yeah, I agree. I think that the non-theists of theorists of everything could discuss and evaluate arguments for the theories. I can't pretend that I know every aspect of one. Yeah, no, you can discuss certain arguments within them if you're not a theorist of the theories of a theory of everything. But you can't understand when the rules change without being pointed out. So if I say 0 doesn't exist as a number in objective metamathematics, or like the math that is required to describe existence itself cannot include 0 as representing of an empty set or not or nothing, because nothingness doesn't exist at that. When you're describing existence, you're describing somethingness, not nothingness. There's only somethingness when you're describing somethingness. So 0 can't represent nothingness. And so I have this page on my website under writings, redefining 1 and 0. Check it out. It says basically that 0 becomes a structure that exists in a superposition of oneness and infinity, of 1 and infinity. And in this objective context, in a subjective context, sure, 0 can represent an empty set or nothing, or but it can't in the theory of everything. So you have to change the rules of math. And if I tell that to Tim or someone else who's not really working on a theory of everything, they're just criticizing them from the sidelines, or Sabine Hassenfelder, they're not going to get it. Like they'll be like, that's just some mathematical like, you know, uh, like tricks to say that zero is infinity because all positive and negative, um, numbers added together are summed equals zero. So therefore, it's equal to everything, not nothing. And they'll be like, that's just a mathematical trick. It's like, well, does it work? That's the question. Does it work? Like, I thought we were talking about math here. So this is, but there's so much dogma, and you have to see it for yourself, experience it firsthand, because your firsthand experience always trumps secondhand information. So in order for it to override that secondhand information that you've had drilled into you your entire life, and the firsthand information that also you have experienced regarding, things like zero representing nothingness, or nothing can exist, because you can say, what's in this box right here? Nothing. But really, that's impossible. But I mean, if I handed it to you and I was like, what's in the box? Nothing. But that's, the difference between like an operative like model of existence. So of how we maneuver. So like it's an operative theory. I think Eric Weinstein has described it as, it's like it's a good model that allows us to maneuver and operate, but it's not actually describing of what is objectively true. So what is objectively true? It's definitely something in the box. But what is operatively true? It's nothing in the box. And this is the type of thinking that you only get good at when you're actually describing existence and you're like really focusing on it. But if you're not working on a theory of everything, you're just like critiquing someone's math equations. Good luck, like understanding the nuances of that. Like I'm a logician, I can evaluate ontology and argument structure. I can leave the truth of the premises to the theorists to discuss for their sake. Yeah, that's true. You just can't have like skin in the game, really. Like, but you can like engage, but not in a way that's, super meaningful to you until you have a belief. And as soon as you have a belief, then you're engaging with it, totally. You're not just like, it's not just like this, for the sake of argument, assume this. It's like this has now become a belief, and it's not just for the sake of argument, it is your understanding. That is how philosophy works broadly. You abandon your traditional approach to words and definitions and such, and adapt the terms and worldview you're evaluating. To not do this is bad philosophy, so you are right to suggest that, in my view. Well, Kant made a good argument, so Hume is wrong is bad argument. Yeah, exactly. Like once I asked this philosopher, I said, we're going to get to my philosophy paper in a minute because I'm going to show some of it, but this guy who was a philosopher, brilliant, IQ off the charts. He sounded like a professor, and this was like 3 o'clock in the morning on a Discord call after a physics conversation with Tim and Eric Weinstein, and they had left, and everybody else had left, and I was just listening to this guy discuss philosophy with other people there, and somebody was like, well, what's the difference between Marxism and this? And he was like, well, the first thing you have to know is that there's 3 Marxes, and there's not even one Marx. There's 3 Marxes, and I'm like just listening to this, and eventually I just stopped it, and because he was just like, well, if you haven't read this, and you got to read this, and you got to read this, and you got to read this, and I just stopped, and I was like, so what is the point of philosophy? Like, what is the definition in 1 or 2 sentences of philosophy? And what is its purpose? And he was like, well, if you could define philosophy in 2 sentences, then it's not philosophy. I was like, you piece of shit. Like, I knew that was coming, but like, that is the worst answer and also the most expected answer you could get from a philosopher who's actually a non-philosopher, like somebody who calls himself a philosopher but is actually a non-philosopher. This is like when academia takes over philosophy and it becomes about how to just make things very complicated and deep. And it's like, how many ways can you just circle around an idea without actually like getting to the root of it? And getting to the root of it is the point. You know, if there is a point to philosophy, he literally told me that philosophy was meaningless and useless. And it was his PhD. I'm like, you're devoting your life to something that you admit is useless. It's crazy to me. That's just nonsense. I don't understand that. I mean, even if you devote your life to, like, I don't know, playing an instrument, like, that's not useless. I would never call that useless. Or like keeping lizards, like, I wouldn't even call that useless. But if you believe that what you're dead, I don't even think philosophy is useless. I think it's incredibly useful. But to call it useless and then devote your life to it is ridiculous. But I have noticed that as a trend in philosophers. Tell me consciousness doesn't exist, but I'm getting my PhD in the philosophy of consciousness. What are you doing? Getting your PhD in something you don't believe even exists? Like, where did we go wrong for that? So wrong for that to be like not perceived by someone engaging with it as an incoherent, perspective. I don't know, but academia has screwed us all up. I'll always use my name when I criticize you, Tyler. Good. You should use your name, Walt. I appreciate it. Anybody who criticizes me honestly, and my ideas, and also, if you have a criticism of the way that I do things as well, then that's fine. But if you do it not anonymously and you do it kindly, bring it on. Like that, and you can tell when somebody's being kind. I've had people criticize me where I said something that was, cruel online, and they criticized me, and I was like, you know what? They're right. And I literally have deleted posts because of it. So I'm not totally opposed to criticism. Sometimes your knee-jerk reaction is like, well, F you, but like, I've gotten pretty good at not having that reaction, I think. So, just through practice. Based response to free will. I have proof for that. I'll also eat crow if I'm wrong, and I just want to hear us get closer to the truth. Exactly. Based response to free will. I have proof for that. Which response to free will? Myers-Briggs temperament indicator. Yeah, I think that is. Or it's 16. Yeah, it's 16. It's not 12. Yeah, but 16 is like, look at this. So this is my creation model. It shows like the mathematical and logical constraints of creating creation, not creating existence. Basically, of God creating a universe within, or creating multiplicity of consciousness within oneness of consciousness. That's the most technical way of putting it. But if you see here, 16, and that's a structure that pops up here quite a bit. And it's literally the average of the two perspectives of existence, of creation, which is this. This is right here is creation. There's one perspective here, and there's one perspective here, and then the average of the two, which is 18 and 14, is 16, and then so 16 makes sense. It's a square number, and square numbers are objective. But I want to introduce exists, occurs, obtains as relevant distinctions in your ontology. I think it will prove fruitful. Exist, occurs, obtains. I like that. I'll write it down. And we're going to look at my paper. Exists, occurs, obtains. Okay. So that makes sense. I get these. That it's a triadic structure. That makes perfect sense. I wrote something similar last night in my notes. Let me read it. I mean, it might not be seem as similar, but I see it as similar. I wrote like the various like goals or perspectives that are shown by the within orientation by the four primary perspectives, and I was like connectedness, differentiation, and hierarchy, which I think that that was like not so good, and then I refined it and I was like location, relation, direction. So like exists, occurs, obtains. Location, relation, direction. Let me write these down. Location, relation, direction. And then I did more. I was like, I think I did generation, singularity, and responsibility. So it was like obtains is like responsibility. Occurs is like generation. And then exists would be singularity. So I like your words. I was literally working on something very similar last night. That's funny. What are the odds? Probably 100%. When people are like, it's probably nothing. Probably the odds are almost zero. No, probably the odds are almost 100, if they're even almost anything. But it did occur. Things exist. Entities or objects exist. Facts don't occur. They obtain from reality, or they are obtained. It is a straightforward proof for me. I agree with it. Facts don't occur. They obtain. Yeah, I agree. Or they are obtained. But both are true. Things exist. Yes. We don't say events aren't real just because they don't exist. Events are made real when they occur. The Battle of Hastings doesn't exist. But it did occur. So events occur. Exists, location. Occurs is direction. You think it's the other way. Obtains is direction. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Nice. Obtaining is done via truth makers, and there's something about a fact that makes it cohere to reality to obtain a truth value. I'm not well versed on truth making. I don't know exactly what that means, but this was good. Yeah. Exists, occurs, obtains. So I delved a lot into for anyone who's hardcore enough to be, one of the people watching right now. I've been working on my paper a lot, and basically I've shown this before. This is a structure that I'm using to show mathematically, I guess you could say, or logically, that the four primary perspectives are correct, and that there is always four perspectives that are perceived in a change that is that is where change happens, that is happening in a way that our mind would change things. So basically, if you look at this structure right here, basically this is the initial state. This is the goal state. So here, all the ones, everything here that's a 0 is a 1 here, and everything that's a 1 here is a 0 here. So basically, from the initial state to the goal state, we have just a reversal of values. Okay, but there's two ways in which you could get from the initial state to the goal state, and one way is the way the computers do it now, which is they do this kind of thing. Okay, and so in order to get from this to this, they'll go like this. They'll go trying to make sure you guys can see. They'll change, and you have to maintain coherence. So you can't just say, I remember that the ones were going through the center, and therefore I'm going to just like remake it over here. You have to maintain intrinsic coherence within the system. So all information that's on the screen here has to be able to be used to generate the next the change. So here you would say that 1 now becomes a 0. That 0 becomes a 1. That 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. And then 0 becomes a 1. 1 becomes a 0. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 1 becomes a 0. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 0 becomes a 1. 1 becomes a 0. And now we're matching this. But that took 16 steps. Okay? How do we do this faster? So let's try this again. Now I'm going to do an action as by lumping all of the same actions into one action. So I'm going to apply one action to all the bits of information as opposed to an action on each bit. So this is a bit, this is a bit, this is a bit. There's 16 bits essentially. So we're going to apply one action to this entire structure. Control-Shift-H. We're going to find all of the ones, and we're going to change them to zeros, and we're going to change the zeros to ones. Or we're going to find all of the zeros and change them to ones. Replace all. Oh shit, something happened because we lost coherence. Now we don't remember where things were, because remember, you can't use your memory outside the system, so you have to use the system. And what happened here is you've lost coherence of information. So let's try this again. Now you can go Control-Shift-H, which is find and replace. We're going to replace all ones with twos. Okay. Okay, so now we have that. And this was the initial state. Just for memory's sake. And now we're going to take this one and we're going to go Control-Shift-H, and we're going to find and replace all zeros now with 1. Place all. Okay. We're almost there. One more. Control-Shift-H. All 2's now are going to be changed to zeros. Boom. And now, in 3 actions, because this is one action, action 1, action 2, and action 3, in literally 3 actions, we did the same exact thing, the same act. We had the same result as we had from altering each bit one at a time, which was 16 actions. So this, where you're altering each bit one at a time, 16 actions. This is how computers today do things. This is how quantum computers kind of do things, because they can exist in superposition states and they can imagine things. So you can imagine twos into the structure, essentially, because this is basically imagination, because it doesn't actually exist objectively. It just helps you get from the initial state to the goal state, but it is created by the imagination in order to maneuver from the initial state to the goal state. And it is extremely efficient compared to, the way in which computers do things. So if we look and we're like 16 versus 3, I mean, that's crazy of a difference. I mean, that's like just ridiculous. It takes 18% of the energy, essentially, to do this method than of what it takes to do the other method, which is like the binary computing method. So what you realize is that you get these 4 perspectives of what I say is oneness, outside, separate, and inside. And they also, the relationships between these help explain even what the relationships are between these primary perspectives. So my paper is here, and I'm writing it, and it's going very well. And I'm airing it. This is like the very beginning of airing it. By the way, like, I've written a lot, so I have like a lot of stuff. But and I released the first part, which is reimagining 1 and 0, on my website. There's some issues with how it pasted in there, but it's still pretty much there. But I'm writing this part right now, the 4 primary perspectives: oneness, separateness, outside and inside, and I'm discussing this kind of like, how things can be changed. And so, but there is my abstract to my paper. Regarding what the definition of sentient singularity theory is. Sentient singularity theory describes the totality of existence as a singularity of sentience that is creating additional sentient singularities within itself. Each sentient singularity perceives 4 primary perspectives that define relationships, allowing for orientation beyond relativistic contextual descriptions. These 4 primary perspectives of inside, outside, separate, and oneness are entangled to form instances of perception of the instance itself by the instance itself. The self-aware instances that compose a sentient singularity are called quanta of consciousness, given that the primary perspectives are perceived in instances of consciousness and that someone can only be conscious of perspectives of relationships. A sentient singularity's quantum of consciousness and the entangled primary perspectives that inform it are simultaneously created of and created by each other. This pattern results in a oneness of mind composed of the union of a single head string of consciousness built on an assembly of entangled body points of perspective. This united head-body pattern of singularity informing and informed by an entangled assembly of 4 primary perspectives is the universal and fundamental source code of existence, and it is present and repeating in all instances of objective observation that can be made in any field of study. That is like the abstract. So it looks like there's only one person watching right now, but I think it might be Walt, but you are the philosopher, so that's fine. If you've heard that, let me know your thoughts on that abstract. But that is my paper. I've been writing it for like a year, over a year, but certain things have changed. When I started it, it didn't even have there wasn't a name of the theory, and it wasn't planning on having a name of the theory. Um, Actually, about 6 hours of content in various chats from you. I think I'm starting to understand a little bit. This is a way of encoding how we see the world, and thus we can make predictions of what we would see. However, this doesn't necessarily mean that we are making predictions with a theory of everything that are accurate to reality, rather perception. Yes, that appears to be the case, but it's also, I would argue that my work suggests that it's that you are a mind inside a mind. So you are a mind perceiving the structures of mind through the structures of your mind. So it's just an inescapable like view, and is simultaneously predictions of the structures of reality, because the structure of reality is the structure of mind, because consciousness is fundamental to existence, but according to sentient singularity theory. So this work doesn't, it does explain that. It's both. You can't escape it due to the constraints of these patterns, due to the constraints of your own mind, but because you're inside a mind, even if you could escape it, the constraints of your own mind and mental structures, you would still see the same structures that are coming from the structure of mind, of the universal mind. So it's just everywhere. This could be at least an explanation of how we identify some metaphors and archetypes, why we draw certain associations. It does apply to that, but it's not just that. But you are right. But it's also that perception, the structure of mind is the structure of matter. They're not separate. That's the reality of, I believe, and that's what sentient singularity theory implies. So it is this, this describes the structure of reality, and it describes the structure of mind. Hey man, how's it going, Kevin? Um, I'm here. I think it comes down to arguments. Worldviews take a lot, and writing something this big could be decades of work. Thank God for the internet. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's definitely true. That it's. I mean, it could be decades. It is going to be decades of work that that this leads to. But I'm done with all the models. Like there's. So the thing that I realized is that when I first started this project, one of the things that I said was I was writing a paper and I had come up with like a description of a theory of everything, essentially. And I was writing a paper, and I didn't know how I was going to end it or publish it or anything like that. And I was really concerned about never being able to end it, because how do you end a paper on the theory of everything? And it's in my second video that I posted to this channel, which is the intro to sentient singularity theory. You can watch it. And what I realized over time is that a true theory of everything is the unified pattern of existence, and any description of that unified pattern will also follow that unified pattern. And because of this, I actually know that I'm pretty close to being done with laying out the theory. But that doesn't mean that I'm close to being able to, apply it in every circumstance. That's not true. It's going to be endless, amount of work to apply it in every circumstance. And that's going to be work that I do later and work that others do after me. But the description of the work, of the models, of the theory is basically done. It just needs to be written out. It needs to be finished being written out. And That's going to take me probably till the end of the year to finish entirely. But this paper on the primary perspectives, hoping to have a first draft out within the next like week or two. And it's just a first draft. This is very hard. I've realized like writing philosophy, especially when you're tying it to like mathematical logic, which you always should, but I'm tying it to number, I guess, and physics. It is so hard. Like there's just so many ways of saying something, and then but the reality is like do you think that that's true, but really there's like one way of saying it, but it takes a long time to figure out what that way is. One of the things that I've like really it helps immensely though to understand your own theory to write a paper on it. I understand the primary perspective so much better now than I did like 3 weeks ago. It's kind of remarkable, and we're going to talk more about it, and I'm holding back a bit on like all the revelations that I've had regarding them and what makes them so special. Like I've always known kind of what makes them special like intuitively, but it's another thing to take that intuition and like outline it and like check the logic of it. And I have changed some of the like altered slightly the descriptions of some of the of what these primary perspectives are. So like based on this even recently. So like for instance, I will show this. If we look at the four primary perspectives, in the past, oneness was outside of separateness, but it's actually outside and inside of separateness. And separateness used to be outside of oneness, but it's actually inside or outside of oneness. So oneness is outside and, okay, not or, but and inside of separateness. Separateness is inside or, not and this time, but or outside of oneness. So there's like mutual exclusivity going on. Outside is separate from oneness, and inside is separate and oneness. And this is just like a little bit of a refinement. Like, I mean, when I say changes, I mean like I went from that to that. So it's not like I changed everything, but this was something that it drove me nuts for over a year. I would get Paulina to help me. I'd be like, is oneness inside of separateness or outside of separateness or separate from separateness? And it's like, this is it's like an endless thing, but it's because it's a loop, and that's why it's outside and inside of separateness is oneness. So separateness is inside or outside of oneness. And basically these are entangled perspectives that in order for one to exist, they all must simultaneously exist. They cannot exist without all four of them. You cannot have the perception of separateness without the perception of oneness. You cannot have the perception of outside without the perception of inside. And then when you take them into account, into the context of how existence is generated, and how the logos of existence, that structure contextualizes them further and shows you what comes first and why it's, something must be created inside of and therefore is subject to that which is outside of, and like it just contextualizes all the interrelations between these two. And there's so much that I've been transcribing. There's so much. It's like there's infinite depth to these things. And in geometric unity, you can see this as well. This is basically I can tell that he's starting from a similar thing here, where in defense of Eric Weinstein, to relate back to the original structure, the problem, And he's like, what really interests me is whether God had any choice in the creation of the world. I've talked to Eric about this, and it doesn't appear like God did. That doesn't mean that God didn't have any choice. It just means that it appears like God didn't. The constraints of creating a universe are so tight that it appears like there's only one way to make a meaningful creation. And I've talked to Eric directly about it, and he agreed with me. He says, in the beginning, we will let X4 be a four-dimensional C to the power of infinity manifold with the chosen orientation and unique spin structure. It is otherwise considered to be without a geometry, and that is no metric, symplectic, complex, volume, quaternionic, or other structure is yet imposed upon it. This is the same thing as, I know I was talking to Brian Keating today, actually, about geometric unity and how, like, my work is implying the same things, and how the idea that Tim just disproved the totality of geometric unity is just nonsense. But it says, each sentient singularity perceives four primary perspectives that define relationships, allowing for orientation beyond relativistic contextual descriptions. That's what it is. That's what this is, this structure in GU. But GU doesn't define it as well as sentient singularity theory. I mean, the interactions between that X4 manifold in sentient singularity theory are very detailed, and they're only getting more detailed, and I'll release it next week. But I mean, they're detailed, and the logic for them is very detailed. I mean, this structure right here is it's the universe. I mean, it's literally the universe. I mean that 100%, and I can tell because it has a count of 720, and the intersection, it has 36 intersections, and it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So if we go, see here, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 45 as the number of, I guess, blocks, like, which is, each block has 16, which is 4 by 4, and I mean, there's just, it's built, the structure of the universe is built into this, and I didn't even try. It just emerged, which I just predicted it too. I was like, I bet you I'll be able to go to 4 perspectives with this. And I got it. I was like, I bet you I'll be able to extend this to 9. And it happened. And then I was like, I bet you this will be a count of 720. And it was. And it's just that I've gotten good at seeing where things are inevitable. And this is a more contextualizing model of the universe, whereas this is an operative model. It shows how do you change things, how do you perceive things, versus this is how are things generated, and where is their place versus perception. But it's the same thing. This is 700. There are 720 little squares here. Look at that. 720 is the count. And then one within itself and within itself, and it just goes on. But GU, I think, describes this type of structure. This is it is a subjectively chiral, meaning like lopsided structure, and emergently symmetrical, which means from the center out, or objectively symmetrical. So from the center out, which is objectivity, here it is symmetrical, but as long as you put the center as 4, which is not a coincidence at all, obviously. And then from the top down, it is emergently chiral. And that's it, and this structure does contextualize it in a way that you can understand what creates chirality, or the emergent perspective of chirality in the universe, and it's caused by spin. And it's I think about it as imagine you're in like a circular kiddie pool, okay, and the water in it is spinning in a vortex, and you have to swim from one side to the other. You swim across it, but the current that's spinning the water in the vortex pushes you so that you end up just off to the side on the other side of the kiddie pool. It looks like it creates the emergent perspective that the pool is kind of lopsided and not actually symmetrical, because you can never actually end up directly symmetrical to where you started or across from where you started. And this is due to spin. It's not actually like a real structure. It's like it's an emergent perspective due to the fact that the structure is dynamic. And like, I don't know if Eric could tell you that. I mean, maybe, probably he could. I bet he could. Like, he's probably the only person that can, other person who can tell you that. But yeah, he could tell you. I bet. If anybody can tell you, besides me, it's Eric. But like, you can't tell that here very easily, but you actually can, because this is a spin structure happening. But it's, you know, that's how I started this. Is I was like, you know, this right here is spin. It's like a candy cane spinning around. So that's how I started this. But GU, like the idea that Tim disproved GU completely and it's a dead theory, that's nonsense. It's just nonsense. The philosophical and theological implications of geometric unity are also largely correct and consistent with sentient singularity theory. And everyone else's work in this right now, like Clearwin's work and Stephen Wolfram's work. Let's look at some of this. Tim needs to reassess what it means to disprove, and he should try not to disprove something. This is like when people in sciences are like, well, is it falsifiable? If it's not falsifiable, then it's not a legitimate theory worthy of being taken seriously. It's like, you think you can falsify the truth? You think the truth is falsifiable? Like, actually falsifiable? Try falsifying the idea that existence exists. Good luck. Like, it's such a stupid idea. An idea of like, is it falsifiable, is a stupid idea, because it's wrong idea. That's what it is. It's not stupid. It's wrong. It's incorrect. It's a non-idea. That's what it is. It's a non-idea. It doesn't actually exist. There isn't, like, if something's falsifiable, it's not the objective truth. If something is the objective truth, it's not falsifiable. That's the point. I don't understand why you would want. This is what I mean by like, the rules of science change when you're describing existence itself versus describing a segment of existence. If you're describing some phenomenon in biology and you're like, okay, this is my theory in biology. This is my theory in chemistry. This is my theory in economics. It's falsifiable. You can check it and see if it's wrong. If I ask you, like, if you tell me, okay, I have 3 apples in my fridge, it's falsifiable. We can be like, okay, you know what? Let's go check your fridge and make sure you have 3 apples. And if not, then it's been falsified. But you can't be like, let's falsify the idea that we exist. It's like, you cannot falsify that idea. Like, you exist, and you by definition, are proving your existence by even attempting to falsify your own existence. So it's like, I think, therefore I am. You can't falsify that. And that is the difference between a field whose goal is the description of the pattern of the totality of existence itself versus a field that is a segment of that existence and exists in relativity and not objectively. Anything that objectively exists is not falsifiable. It's like consciousness. Cannot falsify the idea that consciousness exists. It's like when those philosophers who were getting their PhD in the philosophy of consciousness were like, my theory is it's a non-theory. They said it was a negative theory, which is an anti-ideology or an anti a non-belief, an anti-belief belief. And you can't falsify the idea that consciousness exists. There's no way to do it, because in trying to do it, you prove it. So, like this, you have this, but getting the scientific community that's not working on a theory of everything and not really like perceiving the constraints and freedoms of this task to recognize that that you should not be seeking falsifiability is not going to work. Stephen Wolfram recognizes this, though, because he is seeking a theory of everything. I heard him say we shouldn't seek falsifiability, we should seek confirmation. I'm like, yep, that's the way to do it in this. Now, in subjectivity, seek falsifiability, but in objectivity, seek confirmation. In subjectivity, you'll experience entropy. In objectivity, you experience growth. And, or entropy is intrinsic to subjectivity, but growth is intrinsic to objectivity. So, staticness doesn't exist in subjectivity, but it does in objectivity. So, like, these rules change. And you have to know why and where and how they change, or else you are not worthy of being called an expert on any theory of everything, unless you are aware of these things because you worked very, very hard on someone else's theory, or you worked very, very hard on your own. And, Tim has not done this. So he cannot know, like, this stuff. He can't. Like, his not, this is what I don't understand why. My biggest, like, critique isn't even of Tim, it's of Luis, who I really like. This isn't a personal attack. It's just like, he does have a theory of everything that's really onto something. Has a lot of similar structures to mine and to geometric unity. But yet, for some reason, he's willing to call, Tim one of the few experts worthy of, engaging with, on geometric unity. No, he's not. Not at all. Like, if you don't have a theory that you're working on very intensively, you're not one of those experts that's worthy of a long discussion and a debate, or not a debate, but a little bit of a debate, but a challenging conversation. I'll say that, a challenging conversation versus, like, you've challenged aspects of this idea. You might critique the math a little bit, but you didn't challenge the idea. I asked him, what are the philosophical implications of geometric unity, of the and its cosmological implications? Crickets, because he doesn't know. He doesn't know. Like, I don't think so. At least, I mean, he answered me on other things, but not on that. He just sent me a link that was like, everything you need to know is here, and it was like a link to all of Eric's talks. It's like, I've seen them. I don't need you to send me them. And his the interviews that he's done, mathematically, I'm not going to comment because I don't know. I'm not as mathematically literate as him, but I do know that the rules of the math will change in this space, so it doesn't really matter much that he is like trained in math. This is a whole new field of mathematics. That's why Stephen Wolfram calls it meta mathematics, and we should seek confirmation instead of seek falsifiability, and we should call it meta mathematics instead of calling it mathematics. It's like, so who's the expert? Like, point to them. Kurt said this. He said, anybody who's working on a theory of everything, he's basically realized has to invent their own field. It's so true. And we're converging that field now. But, with dragging a lot of egos along the way. But it's like there is, if you're not working on a theory to describe existence objectively, you're not an expert on the theory of everything, whether that's geometric unity or emergence theory or sentient singularity theory or the CTMU. It doesn't matter. Even string theory. I think that a lot of people, part of the problem with string theory is that most of the people who are studying it today were not the originators of the theory, and it's basically gotten lost in the weeds because we forgot what these descriptions really meant. We forgot how what an electron really is, or what a particle even really is. Like, what is a particle? We forgot. We think about it as a little like grain of sand. And a lot of the people that are studying physics think about it as that, and that's not what it is. And so, but the fact that they do think about that has destroyed anyone's understanding of quantum mechanics. And like, it's also true probably of string theory because it's the theory of everything that's been out there for so long and has people who have gone through the academic system and then gotten their PhDs and now are working as faculty on this problem that they thought they understood, but they really didn't. Just like whoever invented the word religion. That guy had no business describing theological traditions. And, he screwed up so many things. If they're all religions now, they're all competing instead of they're all describing a different structure and have a different role. You just lost all that because you just called them religions. It's just stupid. So, I don't know. I think that Tim's work is worthy of reading the paper. If you want to see his critiques of geometric unity, I recommend it. But I I can't say that he has any legitimacy in his understanding of like this field. Like really, like objectively, I don't think so at all. These people who are just consumed by abstract mathematics and don't ever link it to, hard reality. It's like, well, it's what is Bott periodicity? Point to the instance of reality that you can touch and tell me that's Bott periodicity. And if you can't, then and you don't think that it exists in an instance in which you can touch it and see it and interact with it, it doesn't exist. And don't tell me what it is. Who are you to tell me what it is if you don't actually think it exists? This is such a problem. We don't understand that what we think of as hard material is not, and what we think of as abstract is hard material, essentially. And it has thrown off every field that we have, including politics and everything else. But let's see here. See if I can pull up Tim's work. It's not as late as I thought it was, which is good. Here we go. Geometric. Geometric unity link dump. from Tim Nguyen. I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Okay. Where's his geomet? Let's see here. Where's his paper? Like he's like, why does he feel that he deserves to get on like a podcast because he wrote a paper that criticizes someone's math? It just, I mean, I understand why he thinks he does, because he doesn't understand that he doesn't understand the field. And I understand that. Like, I'm not, criticizing him for that. That makes perfect sense. If you don't understand, if you're not in the field, you can't understand it. And machine learning. Oh, I'd love to talk to him about machine learning. People who go on, working on machine learning don't actually they don't understand intelligence. They do understand like neural networks and decision trees, but that's different. Kind of. Response to geometric unit. Here we go. I'm going to download it. Okay, response to geometric unity. Timothy Nguyen and Theopolia. Abstract. We distill some of the technical ingredients behind geometric unity, a recently proposed theory of everything by Eric Weinstein. In doing so, we identify specific gaps, both mathematical and physical in origin, which jeopardize geometric unity as a well-defined theory, much less one that is a candidate for a theory of everything. Okay, so they're just destroying. And I'm not saying that, even if geometric unity was wrong, it's like, it's still wrong to just rip it apart with because you are just looking to destroy it, and it's not and your disagreement with it isn't an emergent phenomenon because of your belief in something else. It's just that you disbelieve in geometric unity. It's just destructive. But it's also destructive to Tim's mind. Like, it's more destructive to him than it is to anyone else. I'm not complaining about like, oh, poor Eric. Like, no, this is more hurtful, more harmful to Tim than it is to anyone else, because it's Tim who has become the chicken with his head cut off, because he has defined his perspective by an anti ideology or a by something that he doesn't believe exists. If you think something is wrong, in the theory of everything, it means it doesn't exist. Okay, something that's wrong isn't true, and there isn't really wrong in the theory of everything. There's just true and that's it. There isn't even true and not true. There's just true. That's it. And anything else that doesn't fall into that description or that definition of true just doesn't exist. And so, objectively, it is this realm in which your mind operates. So if you're like, oh, well, I'm going to define my perspective by something that's wrong, well, your mind operates in objectivity, and because of that, you're defining your mind by something that doesn't exist, and you're gonna just like spiral like a chicken with its head cut off because you're chasing like a non-structure. Like that doesn't work. um I mean, obviously, like, Tim would disagree with all of this probably because like this is the lessons that you learn when you're working on a theory of everything, not just like debunking one. um and I understand the frustration with Eric's like vagueness in describing geometric unity, and he is vague and it's purposeful, and I know that it's not entirely purposeful all the time, but I know that it's also purposeful, and that's because you know, if he was really blatant about the implications of geometric unity, he would experience even more hostility from the scientific and academic environment, and he has in the past when he unveiled it as his thesis. They literally like changed the rules on him and like didn't let him defend it, and like there was so much hostility that went on that it's almost unbelievable. But I know that it's probably true because I've experienced it as well. It's like an irrational level. People will say, "Well, that doesn't make sense." No, it doesn't. But it's like Chris Langan says, the way in which you deal with theism in the sciences is you ban it. You don't engage with theists logically in the sciences or in academia because you can't. So you just ban it. And that's because of that whole thing of like, you can't. Basically, you've started engaging with an idea that's unfalsifiable, and like science doesn't know what it's doing, or the scientific establishment doesn't know what it's doing because it's so used to falsifying things. And all of a sudden, there's a new idea that's unfalsifiable, but also does seem to make some sense, but it's unfalsifiable, and it's also against everyone in the sciences, basically their perspective of the world, which means if it turned out to be true, everybody's got egg on their face, but not just egg on their face. None of them are experts in what they think. Their entire perspective on reality is it is wrong. It's not just like, oh, they were off on something. It's like, no, they thought consciousness came from unconsciousness. They thought this was all chance. Like, they didn't think it was the combination of logical inevitability and choice. It's just chance, and chance doesn't really exist mathematically. So good luck creating a random number generator that's actually random. But yeah, Eric is definitely vague about the implications of his theory, but not entirely. You go through geometric unity, and you start seeing not so much here, but when you get into like here, and he's doing his description at the end of his presentation, this is not vague. It's just that it goes over the head of people who can't contemplate it. So, like, listen to this.
In any earlier theory. Now, every time you have an effective theory, which is a partial theory, there is always the idea that you can have recourse to a lower level strata. So you don't have to explain, in some sense, everything coming from very little or nothing.
Exactly. This is what I mean. An effective theory, that's the word for it, not an operative theory like I called it, but an effective theory versus, like a objectively true theory.
Known to make many
So
recourse to a lower level strata. So you don't have to explain, in some sense, everything coming from very little or nothing.
nothing.
I think that
everything doesn't come from nothing. There's nothingness doesn't exist. But
issue that people don't talk enough about is the problem of the fire that lights itself. And I think
it's not a fire that lights itself. That's it's like that's like one of those bad questions. There's no answer. It's a fire that fuels itself, and it's always been lit. Okay, that's the answer to that question. I have it on my website. It's not a fire that lights itself. It's a fire that fuels itself and has never not been burning.
Beautifully demonstrated by M.C. Escher in his famous lithograph Drawing Hands, where he takes the idea of the canvas or the paper as a given, but somehow he imagines that the canvas could will into existence the ink needed to draw the hands that move the pen that draw the hands. Um, that
This is this structure. This is why I defend geometric unity, because I can't say it's wrong without attacking my own work to some degree. It says, given that primary perspectives are perceived in instances of consciousness, and someone can only be conscious of perspectives of relationships, the sentient singularities, quantum of consciousness, and its entangled primary perspectives that inform it are simultaneously created of and created by each other. Like this is this. It's creating itself.
concept is actually the super tricky part, in my opinion, about going from effective theories to any attempt at a
And it's
fundamental.
not really creating itself, it's like generating the change of itself. Because I think that it's just like the sentientness of existence is a logical inevitability, it seems. It's not something that had to be made or just like popped into existence one day. It is existence. Nothing can exist other than that. It's a loop of coherent information. A loop of coherence is necessary to information processing, which is necessary to contextualization of information, which is necessary to the existence of information, like at all. So it's just inevitable.
Theory. So, with that said, what I want to think about is what antecedents does this concept have in physics? And I find that there really aren't any candidate theories of everything or unified field theories that I can find that plausibly give us an idea of how a canvas would will an entire universe into being. And so that
Notice how he said will an entire universe into being, not like cause, but will.
really, to me, is the conceptual problem that I think bedevils this and makes this step quite a bit more difficult than some of the previous technical steps. If you ask for antecedents, however, there is one that, at least within physics, is relatively famous, and that is by John Archibald Wheeler. And it is a picture, in some sense, of the universe contemplating itself. And so this idea that somehow the universe would contemplate itself into existence, maybe the letter U is in some sense analogous to the paper, and somehow the I, rather than the hand, is drawn across to look at a different part of the U. And whether or not that has meaning is intrinsically always a question.
It does have meaning. Everything has some, meaning. This is an extra arithmetic symmetry. The you, meaning you, like someone, you are someone, and it is looking at itself. Like it's not a coincidence. Also, Chris Langan also uses this structure that it seems like was made by Archibald Wheeler, John Archibald Wheeler. I think that's who we just said. I have no idea who that is, but I've seen it in like some papers of Chris Langan as well. I just skimmed and I saw this same structure.
Are animated by it, but I don't know that people have actually worked on it. The quote of Einstein's, I think, that really speaks to me often the most, and maybe even was my thesis problem, was he asked whether the creator had any choice in how the universe was constructed. And so I think if you believe that the canvas is itself the that which generates all of the content and all of the action, you're left with a puzzle as to how would you move forward from this. It might be easier in a mathematical sense to temporarily put the U on its back to put it more in line with a standard picture that many mathematicians and physicists will be familiar with. In sector 1 of the geometric unity theory, space-time is replaced and recovered by the observers contemplating itself. And so there are several sectors of GU, and I wanted to go through at least 4 of them. In Einstein's space-time, we have not only 4 degrees of freedom, but also a space-time metric representing rulers and protractors. If we're going to replace that, it's very tricky because it's almost impossible to think about what would be underneath Einstein's theory.
You know what's underneath Einstein's theory? That. This. This is underneath Einstein's theory. It's how you orient without using relativistic contextual descriptions. The 4 primary perspectives. He called them parameters, I think, in his paper, which is a new development because he used to call them dimensions, and I think that that's just not a good term anymore, and I think he realized that too. It just confused everybody. But to call them parameters is actually a good choice. I really liked the switch. You can call them 4 primary parameters that are emergent from 4 primary perspectives and overlap with 4 primary perspectives essentially, and that creates 8. And then the sum total of those together as oneness added is 9. So this is where you get this, but it leads to Bott periodicity and all kinds of things. E8, that's where this 8 comes from. It's 2 structures of 4. It's a mind within a mind, and each mind is a 4-dimensional, quote unquote, manifold, but it's really it's like a knot with 4 relations that result in it tying a smaller version of itself inside itself and therefore contemplating itself. So it's a mind creating minds within itself, and a knot of a string of information causes that string of information to self-reflect on itself, literally, and that's what causes self-awareness. So this is what Eric is describing, and not so bluntly, but if you are aware of what the structure is, it is actually like very apparent. And I understand why you would want to be more vague, but I also understand why the context is necessary to actually taking something like geometric unity that appears so complex and just making it intuitive. And you can.
Now, there's a huge problem in the spinorial sector, which I don't know why more people don't worry about, which is that spinors aren't defined for representations of the double cover of GL4R, the general linear group's effective spin analog. And as such, if we imagine that we will one day quantize gravity, we will lose our definition not of the electrons, but let's say of the medium in which the electrons operate. That is, there will be no spinorial bundle until we have an observation of a metric. So one thing we can do is to take a manifold XD as the starting point.
This is something I'm going to need to think about a lot because I think that quantizing gravity is recognizing that you're inside the particle that is the force carrier particle of gravity, that is the graviton. It's oneness. So like if you want to look at the 4 primary perspectives and you're like here, like oneness, separate. Well, and then outside, it's having problems processing, so it's like going off to the side a bit, and inside. And you want to line these up with the 4 fundamental forces, you go gravity. This would be, I think, the strong force. Then outside would be probably um, ooh, maybe actually gravity. This would be, I think that is the strong force. And then outside would be probably the weak force, so decay. And then this one would be probably like electromagnetism. And so like it's either that or it could be also, this one's definitely gravity is definitely correct, so you would be like that, and then this would be like that, and then the only other way that it could be is where this would be outside, strong forces inside. So it's either this one, or this one, and you just need to like think more about it. And I've been so sure, but then right now I'm like, I'm not so sure for some reason. But it will be in my paper. But it's one of these three, and then you use these to basically reconcile the relationships between the forces. And oneness is the superposition of outside, inside, and separate, because oneness is outside and inside of separateness. So it is outside and inside of separateness. It's literally these three summed is also the fourth. So gravity is the, like, it's the unified force of animation, and then it's broken into a triality in relativity, just like past, present, future is broken into a triality, or length, width, height, or forwards, backwards, current location, or electron, muon, and tau, or up quark, charm quark, and truth quark. This trialic structure exists within. These are the ones within, and this is like the objective perspective. So the only quantization of gravity that you're going to get is that the universe is the graviton. It is moving, and it's moving us via gravity, and then that gravity splits into three perspectives, and we see the weak force due to the emergence of entropy, and as an emergent perspective. So say gravity is entropy from spin. Gravity is also spin, so like it's all spin. Like that's what it is. It's just the universe is spinning around, and it's moving you and me and it, and it just changes our perspective. And entropy is what you perceive when something spins faster than you, and then therefore it's like it looks like you're falling behind, or just like on the highway, if someone speeds up, if they were going the same speed as you and they speed up, it looks like, if you didn't know they sped up, then it would look to you like you went backwards, which is what entropy kind of is viewed as. So that's what basically is happening, is that the universe is speeding up, and we get the perspective of going backwards, and we experience entropy, the perspective of entropy. The strong force, I think, is the force of romantic love. I really believe this. That's why it is the force responsible for the nuclear family is the same force responsible for the nucleus, the bonding of a proton and neutron in the nucleus of an atom, the nucleons of an atom. So it makes sense. It's not crazy. Protons are males, neutrons are females. Um, uh, and then electromagnetism would be basically like the the social energy, the social, um, the opposing uh, feelings of our social societal environment, as well as the attracting feelings of our social societal environment as a whole. I think this is my theory, at least right now. And then the strong force is the force that bonds. It's the marriage force. It is in an atom and it is in a nuclear family as well. It is the strong force that overcomes the weak electromagnetism. People's bonds with their spouse supersede the bond of them with the rest of society. And then weak force is entropy, being perceived, and it's all within gravity, which is just it's all generated by this, all of it. So I think romantic like bonding is essentially in sync movement in that spin by particles that are symmetrical. And then electromagnetism is essentially the bonding and repulsion that occurs in spin, in the spinning of a bunch of particles. So sometimes some particles come closer, sometimes some particles get further, sometimes they're in sync, sometimes they're not in sync. This sounds like society, but then there's the symmetrical spousal energy. And when I met my now wife, I knew, and I said it the very first day that I met her, that I thought I was going to marry her. I said it to my brother on the phone. And the reason why I said that wasn't because we got along so well or anything. It was because I noticed that she was the oldest of four kids, and I was the oldest of four kids, but she had three girls and then a boy, and I had three boys and then a girl, and like there was just like she's black and I'm very white, and like she was a theist, not just a theist but a Christian, and I was an anti-theist really, but I would have called myself an atheist. There was so many symmetries. It was like I was looking at myself in the mirror, and I've said that before on here. That is what I'm talking about. That is like two particles are moving in sync with each other, and you can see that in something like this. So this structure is something I made, and this is E8, which is the structure that is found in my work as well, it seems, and it's also the backbone of Gregor Lisi, who's Eric Weinstein's, self-described nemesis. It's the backbone of his theory of everything, and I went onto his particle explorer and I started messing around, making it dance, and this song that it is, which is an instrumental version of Ultralight Beam by Kanye West, is the song that was the song during our first dance at our wedding. But this is what I mean. You'll see some particles are symmetrical, some move closer and then they move further, but some just maintain that symmetry the whole time. That's my verse. it's just gorgeous. EA is considered like the most beautiful mathematical structure by a lot of mathematicians, and then when you make it move, it's just way more beautiful. Like, that's actually a very good view of existence. If this is the only way in which you perceive existence is just like that, and it doesn't move, doesn't change, that's wrong. You're inside a sentient, living, thinking, feeling being that changes and grows, multiplicity within itself and reacts to you and has goals. I mean, it's just the last time I did it. It's really moving all of us like that. Okay? Like, it's really moving all of us. And some of us are really like, existing in this, symmetrical state with another, and we come close to others, and then we go further away from others that we were once close to, and like this structure is it exists, and it is dynamic. Existence is just so much more beautiful than physicists have made it out to be. And I've heard Brian Keating just say things like, well, why does it have to be more than what we see it as? Like, it's so beautiful as is, and it's so fascinating. And I agree with that. I don't need it to be anything more beautiful than what academia, than the academic narrative. It just is, though. And how wonderful is that? It's not that I need it to be. I don't need it to be. I used to listen to Stephen Hawking's Into the Universe, and like, that's it. And I was an atheist and happy to just be an atheist, smoking weed and listening to Stephen Hawking tell me supposedly how the universe exists, even though he was wrong. Very, very wrong. He was not nearly as good a physicist as people think, because he thought he was an atheist. You can't be an atheist and be like, and understand, existence. You just can't. But it's just beautiful. And Eric has stumbled onto this reality as well, it seems, as that, but it's difficult because you listen to him say things like
answer all of these questions over the next 10 years, as we were told at the time. And quantum becomes incredibly natural, sometimes sort of almost magically. In fact, that this psi really should have two components, and the differential operator should map to one component on the other side of the equation, but the mass operator should map to another.
So in one of these clips that I have saved somewhere,
missing,
I just haven't labeled it yet, Eric...
so instead of G mu nu for a metric,
he basically says that that Albert Einstein asked this question of, did God have any choice in the creation, in the rules of, how to make a universe? Here it is, I think.
and you think of a different medium. Photon's medium does not depend on geometry. If this is an add-valued two-form, the two-form portion of this and the adjoint portion of this are both associated to the structure group of the tangent bundle. But the gauge rotation
He said
is
that
only
Einstein just said this. This is not it. This is some other interview. Tom Campbell. He said that in his discussion that Einstein, this God was Einstein's way of anthropomorphizing, order, and I don't like when people say things like that because, like, who are you to, like, speak for Einstein? But why would Eric say that? He's talking about will of the universe. Okay, willing existence willing a universe into existence. Like, what wills something into existence other than a conscious being? Like, he'll talk about things like, man, there's so many of them, and I have them all right here. I just haven't labeled them yet. I was going through them, like, pretty recently. Let's see here. Is that it? Tom Campbell, by the way, brilliant. Like, that guy's probably the best physicist
Very
alive.
complicated process, and
Alive. If it's not, like, whatever. Like, he's very good. I think that his focus on entropy isn't like the best place to choose to focus, but I understand like why he chose it, and I focus on growth. He focuses on entropy. They're both, but growth. Any objective structure is going to be a structure of growth. So entropy is the emergent perspective. It's not the objective perspective. So that's why I take issue with him focusing on entropy. But other than that, like, it's probably the best. My big toe so far. Now I think it's better than even potentially the CTMU in its breadth and ability to describe existence. Here, actually, let's see this. Where's Eric and Eric and Lisi? Okay, this is what I'm talking about right here. This kind of stuff. Come on, Eric. We don't need to convince Tim of geometric unity's reality. We're talking to him. We're not going to. So it's okay to like be blunt. I think be blunt. I think like I'm very blunt about the implications of my work, but Eric is less blunt. But he's also not entirely like not communicative. So listen to this. This is him and Garrett Lisi. What is he talking about here? I wonder.
Okay, we appear to live in one mathematical structure. So, I mean, a physicist only has to focus on the mathematics that describes reality.
And by the way, I share your intuition that in a certain sense, this is the best and most interesting place to play, in part because there's this very weird feature that we've seemingly unearthed about the physical universe, which is that it unexpectedly has this bizarrely good taste.
Yeah.
About what to care about within. It's as if you let it loose in the mathematical jewelry store, and it selects only the finest pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, and we have to wonder if that's, is that just our human take on it? Because our human aesthetics have evolved within this beautiful world and universe. So is it that, Douglas Adams described the anthropic principle.
It's both, like I said, your perception is through the structures of mind, through your own mind, but you're also perceiving a mind that you're within, and you're perceiving reality as aligning with those structures as well, because it is a mind, so it also contains those structures. So it's not, is it just our human, emergent perspective that, is just logically, inevitably, like, evolutionarily, guided through, a non-sentience and just logic and constraints to value beauty, essentially? Or is it that, this is a constraint of mind itself, and because of that, it's a constraint of existence, which is a mind, and also is woven into how you perceive the world. It's both. It's not either or. It is simultaneously both.
As a
So this would be defined as a bad question.
puddle of water, right? Thinking it's like, wow, this hole I'm in is just perfectly formed to my shape, right? Isn't it wonderful how it just fits me so perfectly, and it's so comfortable here, just like it was made for me? Well, it's like, no, the puddle got there and filled the shape of the hole. I mean, the water got there and filled that shape. And as humans, we ended up here and we filled this niche, and our aesthetic taste was shaped by what's around us, including the mathematics that underlies the physics of this universe. And so when we look at the universe, you might say, oh no, maybe it's just our tastes evolved within this universe, so this is why we find physics aesthetically pleasing.
Do you actually believe what you're saying right now?
No,
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's wrong.
I mean,
It is wrong. But it's not wrong. It's both. It's that the puddle formed to the shape of the pothole, and also the pothole was formed to the shape of the puddle. This is not really that, essentially. That it's an emergent structure, but the way in which we interact and other sentient beings in the periodicity of sentience, or the stages of sentience, interact with the universe. It is a participatory existence. It's not just, the puddle evolved to fit the hole, or the hole was created for the puddle. It's that the puddle evolved, if you're thinking about this as a sentient being, the puddle evolved for the hole and maneuvered to fill the hole, and also the hole was created by the universe to support the puddle. And that's the reality. It's both. It's not one or the other. So the anthropic principle is bad. It's just a wrong idea, because it sets it up as an either or, and it's not. It's a superposition of both.
this is so cowardly.
I know, I agree, and
Right,
I have to wonder about it. I
I understand we have to
every-
pay lip service.
No, it's not just lip service. I think about this. Is it really my proclivities have been shaped by my environment in order to think this? Because I have to question everything all the time.
Sure.
Mostly because I don't talk to enough other people. Think about this. I think universe, you might say, oh no, maybe it's just our tastes evolved within this universe, so this is why we find physics aesthetically pleasing.
Do you actually believe what you're saying right now?
No, I think it's wrong.
I mean,
But
I think
but
this
have
is
to
so
think about it.
cowardly.
I know, I agree, and
Right,
I have to wonder about it. I
I understand we have to
every-
pay lip service.
What's so cowardly, Eric? Be honest. And Garrett Lacey as well. Be honest. They were just there, and that was a moment of honesty, and I commend them for it. But it still went over the heads of almost everyone who watched it. They're saying it looks like the universe makes choices. Okay? That's what they're saying. And it does look like that. And the structure of the universe is a structure that is structured in such a way that it would facilitate the ability to make choices. I can tell you that from my work. That's why I look at hadrons and I'm like, that's a sentient being, but I look at electrons and I'm like, that's not. Because I know what structures are necessary or seem to be necessary in order to make choices. And to make choices is necessary to having autonomy and sovereignty. Kurt Jaimungal asked this on Twitter today. He was like, what does free will have to do with consciousness? It's that the ability to make choices is necessary for defining sovereignty. And a sovereign structure is conscious. You can't have a non-sovereign structure that's conscious. You can't. Now, maybe you can start as a sovereign structure that is conscious and then eventually become a non-sovereign structure that is still conscious. I think that's possible. But you have to start that journey of being conscious as a sovereign structure. Otherwise, you're a finger, like, is my finger conscious? No. Cells are, they have like intrinsic oneness, but a finger is not, it's just like a tool. And it has no free will. It doesn't make choices. Your cells do make choices. When you see cancer or autoimmune diseases, these are literally your body, which is defined in, Jewish philosophy that's in the Tanya as, it's called the mini city. And it is. It's a little city, and your cells are the little inhabitants of that city, and they make choices. They might be, pretty simplistic, but they make choices. Like my animals over there make choices. I'm watching them make choices. They're chasing each other around. They don't have to do that. I mean, maybe they do. That's instinctual. But there are instances where choices are made. They're not every decision that they make, but they're not every decision you make either. When you open up your fridge to choose what you want to eat, it's not a free will choice what you choose. It's motivated by instinct. But if what your instincts are telling you to eat via your cravings conflict with this objective perspective that you might have that's outside of that, like, oh, I want to lose weight, or oh, I want to keep kosher and not eat bacon anymore. It's like those things create an instance where you can now make a choice. Do I go with my nature or do I not? That is free will. And that is the moments where sovereignty can be expressed. And that self-awareness can, like, I guess, become like enabling, like really enabling of beyond just your maneuvering within, new environments. It's like that you actually have a new decision to make. That's an actual decision, and that is an actual new environment. So, but Eric and Garrett Lisi in this clip are discussing the universe having taste, preferences, and they are discussing how it is cowardly to not acknowledge it and to, only portray it as like a metaphorical, not literal, phenomenon. And where Eric is like, I understand you have to pay lip service. It's like, he's talking about, I understand that we say things like, oh, the mind of God. But like Eric said this once, he said, anybody that talks about the mind of God either really figured it out or hasn't and is using the term, for like publicity points. And I agree with him on that. The people that are trying to figure it out, like, they don't say the mind of God. But the people that think they've figured it out, they do, whether they are right or wrong. And I'm going to admit to being one of those people, but I actually do think I got it right. The ability to make predictions that Sentient Singularity Theory has given me across fields is like, it's so beyond remarkable. It's like hard to even discuss with people, because I'm like, sometimes it's like I'll say something and they'll be like, well, yeah, that's that. Like once I said, in the very beginning of this, I was speaking to some physics PhDs, and I was like, as I think quantum entanglement is responsible for the states of matter. And they were like, well, yeah, we know that. And I was like, sick. That's awesome. I'm glad that people know that. I don't want people not to know that. It's confirmation that I was on the right path. But they thought it was like, they were like, yeah, well, you just need to go and like read some books or something. I'm like, I just predicted something that wasn't at all like intuitive for most people, and like they was like it was ignored. I'm not saying that, oh, they should have taken it, and like given me all the credit. No, but don't say, oh, you have no idea what you're talking about. You just predicted that you predicted the existence of disperser mole rats in mole rat colonies. Like, you know what the odds of predicting that are? 0 or 100. That's it. There is no like, oh, there's 25% chance that you're going to predict that disperser mole rats exist. No. You will either not predict it or you will predict it. Okay? And that's just true of a lot of things in this arena. But, you know, the universe appears to Garrett Lisi, appears to me to appear to Garrett Lisi and Eric that it is a being that makes choices based on this interview that they're releasing. I've also had discussions with Eric, that are in more detail about that more privately. But like, he also says it in that it wills the universe. Existence wills the universe into existence in his geometric unity discussion. And it's only when he's in front of all the physicists that he's like, at Oxford, where he's like, oh, did God have any choice in creating the universe? This was just Einstein's way of anthropomorphizing, the need for order. It's like, do you really believe what you're saying right now? To quote your own self, like, do you really believe what you're saying right now? That's my question. Like when Eric says that kind of thing in front of the room, like, I just want to be like,
No, I think it's wrong. I mean,
where he's like,
universe, you might say, oh no, maybe it's just our tastes evolved within this universe, so this is why we find physics aesthetically pleasing.
Do you actually believe what you're saying right now?
that's what
No, I think it's wrong.
I mean,
Yeah.
But
I think
have
this
to
is so
think about it.
cowardly.
It is cowardly.
I know.
It's very cowardly, but I do understand. But the thing is like, if science has the goal of the truth, then the truth is the goal. It doesn't matter that the entirety of every single physics department in every single university across this country thinks you're nonsense. If you're correct, you will be able to do things in engineering and in, understanding that they will never do, and they'll either come around or they won't. And it's like, why do the institutions matter if it takes us lying to them in order to get them on board? I don't want to lie to the institutions. When I first started this work, I almost kind of went this route of like, kind of this like walking the line of like Garrett and Eric, where they're like talking about beauty all the time. And I understand the beauty method guides me, it guides them. I get it. It's very few people that are guided by that. But I thought about, should I call this the entangled quantum force? First I was like, the entangled conscious force, and then I was like, no, like that's going to be like, people are going to be like, oh, consciousness, that's woo. What are you trying to sneak in God? And then I was like, okay, the entangled quantum force. It's like, these descriptions are inaccurate, but then I was like, you know what? I abandon any name because it appears like geometric unity is almost the same exact theory as mine, and at least it's describing the same structures and it has basically the same implications. And then I was like, actually, the name of the theory needs to describe the essential nature of existence itself. If any name of a theory to describe existence must, in even the name, describe the essential nature of existence itself, and that is only fulfilled by sentient singularity theory. You could have said constructor theory as well if a constructor was defined by the theory as a sentient being, but it's not. And I think it's an operator is of a constructor, and a constructor is just a machine that's not sentient. So it's a step below, because a constructor cannot construct anything without an operator of that constructor. I think that's what it's called. Oh no, a user. That's what it's called, a user. So a user. My theory is the theory of the users, more so than the constructors, but it's also a theory of the constructors. But if a constructor was the same thing as a user, which it basically is, when you really start to dive into it. Like, that's what it inevitably would be in reality, but it's not defined that way in the theory, so you have to take the theory as word. So therefore, constructor theory falls short on that, even though it's an amazing piece of work. Like, I'm not saying it's wrong. It's not wrong. Neither is geometric unity, neither is emergence theory, neither is CTMU, neither is my big toe, neither is, SO10. SO10 isn't wrong. My work just now predicted, 45 branches. I'm pretty sure SO10 predicts also 45 branches. SO10. Let's see here. I think that's what it is 45 branches essentially. It's a grand unified theory based on spin group 10. And, yep, 45. It's that 16 by 16, or it's groups of 16. Yeah. I'm looking at this now. And it's 3 copies or generations of the 16 representation. And the branching rules are 45 to 24, and I don't know exactly how to read all this like mathematical language, but says are contained within SU5. This is the conventional something model, with the 16 as the matter fields, the 10 as the electroweak Higgs field, and the 24 within the 45 as the grand unified theory Higgs field. Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what my structure even predicted, is all these quantities. So everybody's right. It's not that these are wrong. They all have problems, but they're not wrong. Newsflash to Tim, geometric unity is not wrong. It's absolutely a step in the right direction. It's going to prove to be largely correct in its implications and in many of the structures. I find that 14-dimensional observer's structure looking thing, I believe in my work. I see it. It's 14-dimensional structure caused by the overlap of 2 4-dimensional manifolds with each one overlapping 3 of its dimensions, essentially, or degrees of freedom, or whatever you're going to call them. I call them, it's specific things are being overlapped, so it's right here, just for the sake of it. But this is a true structure, even if it's not Eric's observerse, but I think it's basically Eric's observerse. This is one sentient being or one mind, and this is another, and this one is inside of this one, and they overlap here. So you have a negative degree of freedom, a positive degree of freedom, a subjective constraint, and an objective constraint. You overlap in the subjective constraint, the objective constraints are outside. The objective constraint of the subjective inside observer is time. The objective constraint of the outside objective observer is space, because it is space, so it can't maneuver in space. It is space. If you're the universe, you are space. And we're subject to time. We have no control over it, really. And so it's an objective constraint. And subjective constraints are present moment, current location. You can't escape them. Intrinsically, not extrinsically, but intrinsically. And then you have your 2 positive degrees of freedom and 2 negative degrees of freedom. So future moment, new location, past moment, previous location, and all of these frame an event, okay, which is an interaction, really. And when you look here, 4, 4, 6, 14, and I see it in my quantum models, where if you take all the fermions and you start like grouping them into groups, you will get 14 groups as the number of groups that you can put them into. And you know, and it's fascinating because it's like, it just works so perfectly. It's like, it's 14 and 14 and 14. It's 3 sets of 14. And are groups of 4 with the count of 14 that are formed. And like the count of those groups of the groups is 9. And then 14 and 14 and 14 is 42 as well, which is pops up in my work as well. So there. Like, there's only one way to make a universe, it appears. And so I agree with Eric. And I also agree that the universe has great taste. It consciously looks for beauty. And, I wrote this. I said, the search for truth is the search for objectivity. The search for objectivity is the search for symmetry. And the search for symmetry is the search for beauty. But the truest beauty is always the searcher. And the truth of the searcher is that they are symmetrical to the sought. Means that you and existence are both symmetrical to each other in some way, which means you're mirror reflections of each other. That means you are the same, but also switched. So you're both sentient beings that are self-aware, but also are switched in your constraints and degrees of freedom, as evident in my attempt at the Observerse, which I would change the name if it's not Eric's Observerse, and he can always tell me, and I'll change the name to Change Matrix or something like that. It's fine. But I don't want to take anyone's terms. But yeah. This work not constructive. There is nothing about the implications of geometric unity in here. There's nothing about the philosophical implications in here. And if you don't have that, how do you know what this stuff comes from, all this gibberish? Oh, but you're an expert. I get it. Like, everybody's an expert in physics fields, even though they literally make no progress, and you don't have an alternative to geometric unity, but somehow you're an expert. It makes no sense. It's like saying, I've never built an airplane, but I'm an expert on airplanes on airplane engineering because I just study it, but I've never built one. And, maybe, sure, you know it well enough to call out problems, but, and I believe that, I believe that there's a lot of people that can do that, including Tim, but you can't be an expert on building airplanes until you build an airplane. Like, you really can't be an expert on airplanes until you build an airplane. Like, I know a lot about airplanes, guys. I could tell you every fighter jet made within the last, 50 years. Okay? And its history and things about it and, all kinds of stuff. I am not an airplane expert. And the best airplane experts, the airplane experts of airplane experts, are the people that have both flown and built airplanes. And I have not. But I have built, a description of the unified pattern of existence. So this is a great piece of work, this geometric unity paper. 69 pages. I wonder if that's a coincidence or if that's a joke, but it's pretty funny regardless. I am a fan of certain aspects of every single theory of everything that is out there right now, other than many worlds, which is total bullshit. Many worlds is total crap. It's just total crap. It's because it's an attempt to create a theory that is avoiding of meaning. So I mean, they wouldn't say that, but I think it's unconscious. It's just an attempt to get to. It's an attempt to like show why existence is inevitable without any kind of theological implications at all. Which existence is inevitable, but that doesn't mean the universe was inevitable. I don't think it was. It was a choice. Existence is inevitable as a sentient being, but for that sentient being to choose to create a universe, that was a choice. It was not inevitable. Okay, wow. Oh, minor correction to logic. I don't know. The symbolic logic, you'll have pick one, not both, or at least one, or both. May not even be a correction. Just clarify in the prose of the paper. Interesting. I need to look into what you're saying. I don't really know. Maybe not even the correction. It is merely, or then separate is equal to oneness in your model. Whereas XOR seems to capture your meaning better. I don't know what you're saying. What are you saying? Oh, me gatekeeping here. No one is a real philosopher in the modern age if they haven't control at and hit delete on a thesis paper. Oh, that's very funny actually. Like, well, because I definitely have done that. Like, I have put this thing aside and basically, like, essentially deleted it a couple times. But I really just, like, put it somewhere and then made a new one. Like, it's so hard to do philosophy. It's so, and philosophy that's this real, it's like so linked to, logical constraints and physics and math, and even some mathematics at least. Like I said, some math has to change, but like this stuff is tough. I went through making this today and I just wrote down everything I could, and then I'm just going to have to go through and edit more and more and more. And I mean, this is like, it's so much, and it just keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then I just wonder whether or not any of this will be digestible by anyone. But then I also know that, like, there I have this paper on homotopy type theory here, and this thing is basically a book, I think, but it was given to me as a paper, and by a physicist who was like, that whole idea that you have about the universe being a mind, I think there's some reality to it. And I was like, really? What made you change your mind? And he was like, this, and he sent me this paper or book, whatever it is. It is over 400 pages. Like that? Who reads that? I can tell what they're getting at, but like, I'm not going to read 400 pages of this. Like, I don't even think Sentient Singularity Theory would be necessary to be 100 pages. I'm aiming for like 40, but it's probably going to be more. It's at like over 20 at this point. This is so much. Every topological space X has a fundamental infinity groupoid whose k-morphisms are the k-dimensional paths of it in X. It's like, this is philosophy, but it's just like really tough. I'm trying to avoid using like symbols like this that are unrecognizable. That whole description in my paper of the theory of Every0ne means the theory describing every sentient person or being, self-aware being, but also a theory that hopefully with, at least some work, but, not, not, requiring of you getting your PhD, could be understood by pretty much anyone, not just like people who devote 4 years and have a 150 IQ to it or something like that. I don't think that it will require that, because the reality of sentient singularity theory is that I'm hoping to place these structures in their real contexts, and in their real contexts they are intuitive, but not just intuitive. Their we have a first person understanding of what charm means. The quarks are like top, charm, truth, down or up, charm, truth, down, strange, beauty. It's like, okay, these are perspectives. We know what beauty is. We know from, even if it's just intuitive, we know what truth is, even if it's just intuitive. We know what charm, be charmed is, or what is charming, or what charm is. When someone has charm, like that, we know what that is. We know what it is when someone is strange, or something is strange, intuitively. You don't have to like be able to write a paper on it, but if I'm like, that's strange, you know what I'm talking about. I'm like, that's true, you know what I'm talking about. I'm like, that's beautiful, you know what I'm talking about. Like, these things are much more understandable than we've been led to believe. And anyone that agrees with that stupid statement of, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, then you don't understand quantum mechanics. That's like saying, if you could describe if you could define philosophy in a paragraph, then it's not philosophy. Bullshit. You're useless in this topic if those are the types of perspectives that you maintain. Like, be useful. Don't wow and I don't know, like this kind of like weirdness that people do. Like Eric talks about it a lot. He's like, we just try and woo people with things that don't make sense, like Schrodinger's cat. It's like, is the cat dead or alive? It's both at the same time. It's not dead or alive. It's that it is simultaneously one and it simultaneously has oneness of mind and has an assembly of multiplicity as its body that is composed of structures with intrinsic oneness and sovereignty to some degree. So like, it's the superposition state, but it's not dead and alive at the same time. No wonder everybody's confused. It's not dead or alive at the same time. Death doesn't exist in objectivity. It literally doesn't. So it's just life. That's it. It lives. That's it. And it follows a pattern. And there's only one pattern that it follows. So it's not, we're very confused because the people leading the narratives have no idea what they're talking about. I highly suggest, my suggestion to Eric, which he doesn't have to follow, I'm not as wise in some ways, and I haven't been around as long, I'll say that. I don't know about as wise. Obviously, he's wiser in some ways. Everybody's wiser in some ways. But I haven't been around as long in the sciences. But it does appear like, it seems to me, at least, that it's useless to try and... If you have to lie to people or be vague enough to where they don't understand it truly, then I don't understand what the point is of that. If they adopt your idea but they don't understand it, then they didn't really adopt your idea. And to Tim, he needs to make his own theory of everything, or find one that he agrees with, and he should probably stay out of this conversation, other than correcting some math, as he sees it every now and then. um, until he works on creating or building a theory of everything that already exists or creating a new one. You have no idea what you're talking about until you do that. You just don't know. You don't know where things change, where the rules change, where it doesn't follow the patterns found anywhere else in any other field of study or any other academic or logical or mathematical pursuit that you could pursue. It doesn't follow the same rules, and you don't understand those rules until you do it. You just like you don't understand certain things about building an airplane until you build it. You can critique the math, but it doesn't matter. They made airplanes for the Navy that math worked, but they were not liked by pilots. Like, there's more to it. Always. But especially in this, more so than in anything else, there's just such a difference in rules. Within the theory of everything, probably the most devastating attack I'd predict on the formulation are attacks to the claim nothing doesn't exist, or reformulated all things exist. This is a huge ontology claim, probably the most difficult aspect in philosophy. Sorry, finals week and working on homework, but why not engage in logical falsifications or mathematical falsifications and such? Falsifications need not be limited to science. There's nothing, either science is everything or it's nothing. Okay? It's like magic. Robert Grant says this, either everything is magic or nothing is magic. This is also true of science. Either everything is science or nothing is science. This is also true of religion. Either everything is religion or nothing is religion. And, the only thing that, there is adopted dogma, and there is first principles individualistic thinking, and that's it. You falsified the existence not existing earlier because you pointed to how existence must be real ontological thing, or we couldn't talk about it in the first place. Falsified the existence of not existing. Because you pointed to how existence must be a real ontological thing, or we couldn't talk about it in the first place. No, I think you're wrong if I'm interpreting that correctly. Well, there is a difference between what is manifested in the change space, in the interaction space, which would be defined as like reality, and then there's what is manifested mentally in the mind that is not intrinsically tied to others, and therefore then becoming a true constraint. So once something becomes an interaction with others, it becomes a true constraint of existence. It becomes truly becomes matter. It matters. But prior to that, if it's just a thought in your head, then it impacts you, but it doesn't impact others. Once it becomes, spoken, it impacts you, and because it's already a thought in your head, and it also can impact others if they let it. Just like if somebody calls you an asshole, you can keep walking, or you can turn around and change direction of your walk, but you don't have to. But then if somebody acts on you, and this is a increasing of force being inflicted in creation of matter, which is like of that which matters. thought, which is thought, speech, then action. Action is one in which I can punch you and you can't choose to ignore it. But I can also call you an asshole and you can choose to ignore it, or you can choose not to ignore it. And I can also think about you as an asshole, and it impacts me, but it doesn't impact you yet. And so is an increasing of mass scale. We also see this in, standard model with electrons, muons, and taus, and neutrinos and quarks. But this is the triality of creation, is thought, speech, and action. And yeah, I mean, if it's in your head and you're like, you have it as like this placeholder, like I do in the primary perspectives when I'm changing those zeros to ones and ones to zeros, but in the center, I change everything to twos. That's like in a mental space, but it doesn't manifest into like, in the same way, on the same level of force. It doesn't require the same level of contention. So I can think about non-existence, but that doesn't mean that it exists outside of the mind. But this is actually like a very important thing to get at, because this is the debate between, I guess, probably my thoughts on a debate between Eric Weinstein and I. Is he says in proto-space-time there's something that's almost sentient but not quite sentient. I say there is something sentient, and in order to have sentience, aka self-awareness, you need those four primary perspectives. But if you exist in a state that is separate from, or prior to, you could say almost, but not really, it's like beyond, because time doesn't exist yet, but in a state beyond multiplicity, in a state of pure oneness, how can you have sentience if you need a multiplicity of states and you need to perceive inside and outside and separate and one? How do you perceive separateness if there's only you and you are one with everything that exists? You can't really achieve sentience logically, and I think this is why Eric thinks that it's almost sentient but not quite sentient. But I think that there is something beyond this that is just not really achievable by anything but God, and it's that God can contemplate non-existence as being separate from him, even though it doesn't actually exist, and that creates the perspective of separateness, and that allows for, and it's only an internal perspective, which means that now you have an inside perspective and you have an outside perspective, and in the outside perspective there's only oneness and there's only existence, but there isn't non-existence. But inside there is the perspective of non-existence, but that means that there's also the perspective of separateness from said non-existence, and all of a sudden you've got the four primary perspectives and you have achieved self-awareness without even having multiplicity of consciousness or structure to, true objective structure, which is consciousness. You don't have multiplicity of consciousness to truly perceive separateness and oneness, but you can contemplate it, and it does allow for perspective to be perceived, but it's not like, that's what I mean by that, is like, we can think about non-existence, but it doesn't really exist. Imagination is real, which sounds like an oxymoron, or like a paradox, but it's not. It's just it just exists on a different like force, in a different level of force. It's just impacting of you. It doesn't impact anyone else, which, if it doesn't impact anyone else, it's not matter. Okay, matter is something that impacts more than one entity, and it is perceived. Matter is perceived in an instance of observation, but like there's no matter when you're just perceiving something in your own mind, because there isn't a constraint that you have to contend with, where non-existence does exist and you have to contend with it. It's like, no, non-existence can exist in your mind, but then you can also think about the fact that it doesn't really exist objectively, and like this ability to imagine is what's necessary also for self-awareness, because you have to perceive yourself inside your own mind, like an abbreviated version. When I say think about yourself, it's like you think about yourself as like a little like avatar in your own head, essentially, and that is requiring of imagination and necessary to self-awareness. So there's lots of like depth to that I will get at in my paper. But I get what you're saying, but it doesn't really prove the existence of non-existence. It doesn't actually exist, but it does exist in imagination. So it exists as like logical of it exists as, a thought that can be used to create logical structures inside your own head, but it doesn't exist as something outside of your own mind, that you and everyone else has to contend with, like existence does. Oh no, it's process philosophy where everything is dynamic. F in the chat for mastering an understanding of the world. I'm a few White Claws deep and memeing, don't mind me. I used to drink White Claws, yeah, it's fine. So I get it. I used to drink White Claws. On my very first stream, I talked about Jews and Owen Benjamin, who's a friend of mine, and I was working for PragerU, and like I was nervous, so I drank some White Claws because it was also like a theme of the streams and the culture at the time in that discussion. But that's pretty funny. Like my very first YouTube video, I was drinking a White Claw. But it's I accidentally deleted every single video on my personal channel. I still have some of the videos, but they're not up in their original state. Like I think my video on here on this channel, which is God is a irrational number. That video was like my second or third video I ever made, but was uploaded to this channel, which is far newer than my old channel. So because it was deleted from my old one by accident, which is insane that happened. But the delete all button is next to the delete this one latest video button and in Creator Studio, which is stupid. Anyways, I'm out too. So peace. Thanks for participating. It was a small group today, but this was deep. And hit the like button, share this, comment, fuels the algorithm. Go to sentientsingularity.com, scroll to the bottom of the homepage, sign up for the email list, because they're going to kick me off as I continue to talk about morals on here in the future. But I wanted to kind of discuss criticism and in regards to this field, and specifically, some using the example of Eric Weinstein and Tim. Like I said, I'm not judging either one of these men. They're both human. Tim is very talented, clearly, even though I don't agree with him at all in whether or not he is going about this the right way. And Eric, geometric unity is very close to sentient singularity theory, so I can't really disagree too much. I think GU will prove to be largely accurate. Anyways, peace, guys. I will see you tomorrow, and have a good one.